Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Penelope Possum channel with your host, Penelope Blossom the Possum. And today is everyone's favorite day, spooky, scary Saturdays. Aw, yeah. I've got some videos queued up on my watch later for us to watch today. So yeah, we're gonna finish the video we were watching last time today, and we're gonna watch all these. Hello. We've got a big queue today. I've got some props here today in case I need them. So if I need a clown horn, I have a clown horn. I have a rubber chicken. I have 2 rubber ducks. So yeah, let's get started. We're gonna watch the last bit of this video.
Yeah, okay.
I stepped inside and immediately noticed something strange. There were photos of me up on the walls. Every wall was covered with pictures.
Oh, from last time, this is the story about the girl who was being creeped on by her boss at the pizza place. So yeah, she's just walked into a house of a lady who made a late night pizza delivery order and found a bunch of pictures of her on the wall.
I recoiled, realizing that these photos were taken from the CCTV footage from the surveillance cameras my manager had installed a while back.
What the?
Before I could finish my sentence, however, I
Yeah.
heard footsteps and whirled around toward the door. There stood my manager. You can't possibly understand the horrifying picture he painted as he stood there. My car's headlights casting a shadow on his disfigured body. His hands hung at his sides, much larger than the rest of his lanky arms. His round eyes stared at me wildly, and a grin spread over his face. I could barely stop screaming, but I still felt hopeful. Maybe he had come to rescue me.
What are you doing here?
Horrible.
You always reject me, and now I can have you. You think that you could just ignore me and get away with it?
I glanced past him and saw that his wife was standing just behind him, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as she muttered over and over.
He'll have you. He'll always have you. He'll have you. He'll always have you.
Her face showed no emotion, as if she were not aware of what was going on. I screamed and ran into the next room, but he came after me, screaming and shouting. I
He's
could
got
hear
like
his heavy
back
footsteps
boots.
thudding behind me, his huge hands reaching for me. I managed to dodge into another room, but as I ran, I saw his wife advance from another doorway.
What is wrong with you? Don't you care that your husband is trying to hurt me?
Still staring at the ceiling, she simply grinned wider and raised a rolling pin in the air. I realized then that they were both psychos, and I had to escape. I made a run for the window and managed to jump out just as they reached me, closing the window behind me. My car was only a few feet away and I made it into it with barely enough time to lock the doors behind me.
Thank
The manager and
goodness.
his wife came running out. The manager held nothing in his hands, but the rage on his face was evident. He gnashed his small teeth as he saw where he was, turning toward his wife and telling her something. I couldn't hear, but the next moment he turned and began to run toward me, his wife following just behind him. I put the car in reverse and peeled out of the driveway, not looking back until I was a few blocks away. I reported them to the police that night and they were arrested. As it turns out, he was responsible for some of the missing girls in town over the past few months.
Ugh.
Never ignore your boss. Never ignore them. What makes this whole ordeal worse, however, is that some of the pictures on his walls weren't from the CCTV footage. Some of them were of me when I was sleeping, when I was driving, or even when I was alone in my own home. I can only conclude that my boss had been stalking me and planning this attack for months. It still
Probably.
sends a chill down my spine when I think about it. But the worst thing is the realization of how close I could have come to the same fate as those other unfortunate girls. Don't ignore your boss if they act strange. Don't assume that it'll blow over and that everything will be okay. Reach out to someone you trust and make sure that they know what's going on. Your safety is more important than anything else. I can safely say that I'm never going to deliver pizza again.
When I finally got off work, it was midnight. I highly doubted any restaurant would be open now. My stomach made a
Not
rumbling sound
usually.
signifying it was dying of hunger.
Hmm.
God, I need to eat. I hurried down the office elevator, finding myself on the lonely
Never
dark
good to be in a
streets.
hurry.
My house wasn't far away, but no man can sleep on an empty stomach. That's when I had an idea. There's a convenience store at the gas station nearby. I can get some instant
Bad
noodles
call.
and maybe a couple of beers to call it a night. Also, it was the weekend, and what can be more exciting than welcoming it with a couple of drinks? I went through with my plan and stopped by the gas station. The owner was
Bad
dozing
call.
on the counter. There was a strong smell that wafted out of his mouth every time he let out a snoring breath. I picked up some ramen noodles and a few cans of beer. Then I walked to the counter and woke him up. With his drowsy eyes, the man rung up everything. I was going to pay him when I noticed a wooden box kept on the other side of the counter. It was filled with red tomatoes. Generally, the
Ooh,
convenience store sold
tomato.
ready-to-eat stuff, so seeing something fresh was a little surprising. Hey man, are those tomatoes?
Yes, from my garden, but I don't sell them at night.
His answer felt odd to me. I didn't know someone needed to set a time slot to sell tomatoes. How much
Ugh.
for a dozen?
I told you, I don't sell them at night.
Suspicious.
Whoa, what the hell, dude? Why not? It's just a bunch of vegetables.
Ah!
He was refusing to sell them, and I was adamant about buying them anyway. Actually, after a point, it became a matter of silly ego. When the man still refused, I took out a $100 bill and dangled it in the air. Can I have 12 of these now? Snatching the bill from my hand, he gave me 12 red fresh tomatoes in a transparent polyethylene
I have a bad
bag.
feeling about
I
those
left
tomatoes.
with a proud smile on my face, which only took 5 seconds to fade away. And this is where things went wrong. I was walking along on the sidewalk and there were no cars on the streets. That's when I heard something behind me. I looked back but saw nothing but the empty highway behind me. I'd already wandered far from the gas station. It was as I was walking in the dark spot between streetlights that I felt alone, out in the middle of the night. I increased my speed, and just then I noticed a man standing in my way. There was quite some distance between us,
What?
but I could see
Can we look at this guy real quick? He looks like an escaped carnival worker. Like, what is he wearing? Why? What is his Why is his face like that? There's so many things wrong with this. And I still feel like it has something to do with those quote unquote tomatoes. I have no doubt that those tomatoes are not tomatoes.
See him. He had a blank face and was staring at me. Then his eyes shifted down to my hand, and a sick smile appeared on his face.
Grinch.
Jeez, what a weirdo. I began walking as I muttered to myself. The man didn't move. He just stood there watching me coming towards him. The more I walked closer to him, the more a tense feeling gripped my throat. What if he tried to do something? We were inches apart when I changed my lane to walk past him, and he surprisingly moved aside as well again, blocking my way. What the? I moved to my left, and so did he. What's your problem, dude? He pointed at my bag of tomatoes and asked for one. Realizing he wouldn't move unless I gave him one, I heaved in disappointment. Maybe he's just some
very
hungry homeless
creepy.
guy. I gave him one red tomato. He took it from my hand with his long, bony fingers and moved away. I started walking, but kept turning back to see what he was up to now. As soon as he got the tomato in his grasp, he chomped a big bite out of it. The tomato was so juicy that the red juice leaked from the corners of his mouth, dripping on his clothes. The way he ate tomatoes made me cringe. I turned away and took the last turn to my house. Thinking the world is filled with creeps, I blame my own unlucky fate for coming across the man. I was close to my house when I noticed something on my right. It was him again, standing under a lamppost. His face was smeared with the juices of the tomato he had already gobbled up, but now there was a smile. What the frack? How did he get here? With slow, trembling steps, I walked towards him. He just stood there, watching me with an evil smile. Suddenly, he jumped and blocked my way. What the hell do you want? Go away, or I'll make you, freak! Ah! 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 He was again asking for a tomato. That's when it hit me. Could he be the reason why the store owner refused to sell the tomatoes in the first place? Did it even make sense? Drops of sweat appeared on my forehead.
Doesn't make
I grabbed another tomato and threw it at him. He didn't try to catch it, and the tomato smashed on the ground. His wide, scary eyes looked down at the ruined tomato, and then looked back at me. I took a step to my right, and he lunged in the same direction, blocking my way. Are you crazy? All this fuss for a damn vegetable? His gaze turned furious, and he gave me a smoldering death stare like he was about to snap. I grabbed my house keys tightly in my other hand. I could see my house flashing like a beacon of safety on the other side of my life and death situation. He suddenly started walking towards me. I wanted to move, but my legs froze. My breathing got heavier. He kept walking and then suddenly picked up speed. Now he was frantically running at me. Ah! I threw the bag of tomatoes at him and ran for my life. I only stopped when I got home. As soon as I got in, I slammed the door behind me. Not once had I looked back during that time. I checked if all the windows were locked, and then cowered under the covers for the entire night.
Yeah, he should have ran before that, but sometimes you freeze when you get scared.
Someone had left a note on my porch. The note read, "Did you know a tomato is a fruit? I bet you didn't."
It's a vegetable.
Hi, I'm Derek. I was really excited to move to New Jersey. I recently got a new job.
Why? Why were you excited to move to New Jersey? That's not normal. Yes, Cheddar? Yes, Cheddar Cheese? Come here. Come on. Cheese. Oh my gosh. Come here. My cat is a little turkey nugget. That's what you were. You were a turkey nugget. Yes, you're a turkey nugget. A turkey nugget.
Job there, but my wife and son were not so excited.
As
But they
they
had
should.
agreed for my sake. We had seen this beautiful house in Westfield. It was nice and cozy, but on the very first night while we were unpacking, we got a call on the landline. We were all surprised that someone had called that number when we had not given it out to anyone yet. I picked up the call. The voice on the other side was deep.
Hello, Derek. Welcome to my home.
The call got cut. My wife asked me who it was. I told her about the call, and she was shocked that the caller knew my name and claimed this to be his home. We were worried and couldn't sleep. In the
It
middle
could
of
be
the night,
anything.
I got up to drink some water and came to the kitchen and was looking for a bottle. I opened the fridge and was shocked to see a piece of cake inside with, "To Derek and his family. Happy staying."
Oh, that
I jumped in fear and hit my back on the counter.
that's
I
not
hurt
good.
my back. My wife came running down to check and saw me lying on the floor. I was in so much
Yuck,
pain.
New Jersey. Yeah.
Just then,
Yeah, just a
the
bit.
phone rang again. This time my wife picked it up and put it on speaker. It was the same voice again.
Hey, sorry if I scared you. It was just cake, Derek. I'm
Oh,
sorry about your back.
fluffy
Hope
cat.
you're okay.
This was even more
Oh,
terrifying.
fluffy
He
kitty.
was watching us and knew what was happening in our home.
Fluffy.
My wife immediately
kitty
called
puss.
911 and told them what was happening. They sent a couple of cops to the
Fluffy
house.
chicken pie.
They took the landline number and said that they'll initiate a trace, and just left. We could not sleep and were wondering what would happen the next day. My wife was already thinking of finding another place to move to.
Tomorrow, I'm calling the realtor. We are not staying in a creepy place like this.
Calm down, honey. The cops are on it. The house is not the issue. It's some psycho who's the problem.
My wife was not completely convinced by this, but since she couldn't do anything in the middle of the night, she went back to sleep. Later in the night, my back pain intensified and I had to go to the emergency room. But we didn't want to leave the kids home alone, so I decided to take a cab. The cab arrived surprisingly faster than I expected. I got in. The cab driver saw me in pain and was very helpful. He even offered to drop me off back at home. I went to the emergency room where they gave me a few painkillers and told me to rest for a week. I sat in the cab and dozed off because of the painkillers. And when I woke up, I was at the doorstep of my place. My wife woke me up. I was surprised to have ended up there. She helped me stand and get into the house. She was about to close the door when the phone rang again. My wife did not want to pick up the call. It continued to ring and stopped. Then it started again. This time I picked it up and the voice was very angry.
Derek, I was nice this time and dropped you home. If you try to
Oh,
contact
no.
the cops, I won't be so nice.
The call got cut. He was the cab driver. I felt so
Yeah.
angry that he was so close and I didn't know. I slept feeling frustrated. For the next couple of days, there was no phone call from the creepy guy. The cops were still looking for the caller and were unable to trace him. I was at home resting because of the back pain. My wife had called the realtor and was trying to find another house, but no good options were coming our way. My wife was getting frustrated. It was the fourth night of our stay. We were having dinner when my son, Sam, suddenly asked,
Dad, my friend Keith told me that this house is haunted. Is that true?
I almost
Maybe.
choked on my food when I heard that. This was news to me. My wife was also shocked to hear this. I told my son that there is no such thing as haunted houses and asked him to finish his food and go to bed. After tucking him in his bed, my wife came and was about to ask me something when the phone rang again. Since the
Fluffy
cops were tracing the
chicken.
call, they had asked us not to stop talking to the caller. And so we had picked up the call so that the cops can trace him. When I picked it up, the caller was laughing.
Derek, tell your son that his friend was right. The walls of the house hide a lot of secrets.
I begged him to leave us alone.
He kind
But
of
he
looks
told me
like
he
an
couldn't because I was part of
albino.
the family from the time I
vampire
started living
pat.
at the house. My wife was frustrated. She took the phone and yelled at him.
Who the hell are you? And what do you want?
He just laughed and cut the call. Later that night, when I was switching off the lights and going to the bedroom, I suddenly felt a shadow behind me. I turned to look and there was no one there.
How do you feel the
I thought I
shadow
was
behind
seeing
you?
things because of what the caller told me. I was about to enter the room when I heard a knock from Sam's room. I rushed to his room and when I opened it, Sam was sleeping peacefully. I heaved a sigh of relief and went back to the room and slept. The next day, our realtor called and we told her
Yeah,
what was
he's
happening
pretty
and
jacked
threatened
up
to
looking.
sue
I
her if she
wonder
didn't find us
why.
another house. She apologized and told us about another place closer to the city. We took the help of the cops and moved to the other place, never to come back to this strange house. Sometime later, I heard in the news about the cops catching a guy called Arthur, who was threatening and stalking people who took that house. The guy was deranged and psychotic. When they caught him, he confessed to have killed people and hid their bodies in the walls of the house.
Oh my god. Well, that was the last story of that. Thank you at IMR Scary Tales
We all
for
have
that
secrets that we
amazing
like to keep
compilation.
hidden from the world. We fear that if anyone got to know about it, it might scare them off. I have one too, and it's the weirdest of all. For the sake of the story,
Yeah,
I
that
would
one
like
was
you to know me
creepy.
as Seth. Sorry, but I can't give out my real name. So, by profession, I'm a graphic designer, which involves hours and hours of sitting in front of the computer. In
Yep.
between my gigs, I watch videos for entertainment, and most of these videos happen to be ASMR mukbangs. A weird satisfaction
Creepy.
runs through my veins when I watch people eat. The more food, the better. I can't explain how and why I like watching these videos, but it gives me relief. Not a day goes by when I go to bed without watching at least 4 to 5 mukbangs. But this habit has now developed into an unhealthy obsession. When the mukbanger eats, I could feel saliva forming in my mouth. My pupils dilate as I watch them insert food into their mouths. The messier it gets, the happier I feel. One night, I was watching a girl
Okay,
eat
you
raw eggs
creep.
when my mom called.
Seth, do you know what happened to the neighbor's kid?
Mom, I'm busy. Can I call you later?
No. The news is all over the paper. Wait, I'll send you a link.
She forwarded this online article, and from there, it all started. Our neighbor's kid was arrested for selling illegal items on the dark web. This wasn't the first time I heard about the dark web. I was going back to my videos when suddenly, an idea sprung into my mind. I have been to the Tor browser quite a few times when I was in
no.
college.
I
Old
have a,
memories hit me,
I have a bad feeling I know where this is going.
and I decided to surf the deep web again. But this time, I wanted to see if there were any creepy videos related to mukbangs. Yes, I know you already think I'm insane, but please bear with me, because what happened next has
Yeah, a
changed
lot
my
of
life
people have
forever.
issues like
After
this.
scrolling through cringeworthy websites and advertisements on hiring a hitman, I stumbled onto this link for joining a chat room. The title read, Blank Soup. Thinking I'd found what I was looking for, I clicked on it. The screen started loading and I couldn't keep still.
Why is it taking so long?
Just when I started to think that I had been scammed, the page redirected to a live stream. A man
Yep,
wearing a white
I knew
tank
where
top
this was
sitting in
going.
front of a table in an empty room that had nothing but white walls. His face was down and he looked malnourished, like he hadn't eaten in days. At first, I thought he was unconscious, but then suddenly, he looked up. There was fear in his face. His eyes were wide and he started breathing heavily, looking at the camera. I could count
The
the bones in his rib cage each time he inhaled.
Yeah, the
What the-
attention to detail in the
Suddenly,
animation was
the door
great there.
behind him opened and a guy
Yep.
dressed
Okay, so this is actually a well-known video on the internet, on the normal internet now. Someone leaked this. There were a few theories about it, but we'll see what this scary story has about it.
in a weird costume entered. He was looking like some freaky mascot. He had this huge
Yes, this is a real video. You can watch it. It's called Soup something. You can probably just look up creepy soup video and this will pop up.
cartoon head and was dressed in black. He was holding a bowl in his hand. The guy placed the bowl in front of that man, and handed him an oversized spoon which looked more like a ladle. The man started eating from the bowl using that oversized spoon, and soon, things turned creepier.
What is he eating?
Once
Soup.
the man dipped the spoon into the bowl, I discovered he had been given a bowl of chicken noodle soup. So far, nothing bizarre, right? I mean, I expected to see him eat cockroaches or worms, but it was only a bowl of chicken soup. The man took the first gulp and went for a second, but the more he ate, his behavior changed. He started crying. He was sobbing like he was in a lot of pain. The guy in the costume started patting as the man kept eating and crying at the same time. It all made no sense to me. Within a minute, the door opened again and another guy wearing that same costume entered the room. He had this big jar in his hand and filled the bowl. It was evident by now that they were feeding the man chicken soup forcefully. The way the man ate also signified how hungry he was, because he kept finishing the soup in seconds. But he didn't stop crying though. I had seen many torture videos on the dark web before.
This is
but
some
honestly,
weird
this one
torture.
didn't match that craziness at all. There came a point when the man couldn't eat anymore, but he still kept stuffing the food into his mouth with that ladle. Some amount of soup dropped from his mouth and he made this gagging sound.
Okay, now it's getting creepy.
I realized that those identical costume guys intended to overfeed this man with chicken soup. The man ate, and when he couldn't anymore, he vomited on that table. His body was shaking and his eyes were screaming for help, staring into the camera. But those guys kept patting his back, stroking the hair on his head like he was their loving child. And they just wanted him to be healthy. People who were watching this video with me had started to comment under the live stream by then, and I decided to check them for more context to what was happening with this man. Most of the comments were straightforward and freaky on how these men should force this man to do more crazy stuff.
Oh,
I agree.
oh,
I'm a bit
Oh,
creepier
bye.
than most people, but those who commented on feeding him worms, snakes, and even his own vomit made me realize how twisted people on the dark web are. After scrolling through the entire chat section, I didn't find anything to shed light on the matter. When I went back to the video, the man was vomiting all over his clothes and yet still eating the chicken soup.
Okay, this is boring now.
I had enough of this, so I exited the website and went to bed for the night. A few days went by and I completely forgot about this video when one day I saw it on YouTube. Someone has uploaded it onto YouTube.
there it is. Blankroomsoup.avi. You can look that up and probably find the video.
People were going nuts over it. Having watched it from the source, I wasn't expecting much to see. But then I found this one comment that made me crap my pants. Someone has shared a theory which is going viral about this video, and it said,
Poor man. No doubt he loved his wife a lot.
feeling shocked and confused.
Okay, so they're going with the most common theory of the video is that the theory is that the soup he was being fed was comprised of his own family members who were killed and made into soup. And then being force fed by these strange men in the mascot costume.
I read the thread and got to know it wasn't chicken soup that the man was forced to eat. Rather, he
Yep.
was eating the soup made of his wife's meat. A creepy video surfaced on YouTube in 2005, featuring a man in distress in an empty white room. The man seems to be undergoing mental torture as he cries, and two mysterious masked men are confronting him. The man who seems to be eating something from a bowl. The clip gets even weirder when you notice he uses a comically oversized spoon. The masked man, who was later identified to be dressed as the Ray Ray character, starts to stroke the man soothingly, something that seems to distress the man further. You then see a second Ray Ray character appear and begin massaging the man on the table. This rubbing gesture makes the man finally break into hysterics and fits of fear. According to the legend, the figures in the costumes kidnapped the man and his wife. They then starved the man for days and served him soup made of the remains of his wife, whom they also killed. That was why he was crying and appeared to be about to vomit. That was why the figures patted his back. They were torturing him, mockingly sympathizing with him, as they force-fed him the cannibalized remains of someone he loved.
Yeah,
When I
as
was a
they said, and
sophomore in
that's a clip
college,
from
I
the
was friends
actual
with this guy
video.
named Steven that wanted to start a popular YouTube channel. During our freshman
The real thing about this video is that there's no actual explanation for it. It just sort of appeared one day. Yeah, very weird. Like, no one has any actual evidence that's what happened. But we also don't have any evidence to the contrary. It's very odd. It's definitely some kind of strange torture. I just have no idea what the torment is. Hello.
freshman year, we were dorm mates, and he would talk about his channel all the time, trying to get me to give him input on video ideas. I always thought he was pretty uncreative, but he did have a somewhat entertaining personality. Of course, I was a big part of his first handful of videos. However, after we moved in with different people the next year, I stopped being in his videos and didn't hang out with him as much. That was until he hit me up to do a McDonald's mukbang video,
Oh,
because
boy.
none of his other roommates wanted to do it, even though he was offering to pay for all the food. Honestly, I always thought the concept was dumb, but as a broke college student, I found it difficult to say no to a day's worth of free food, so I agreed. The next Saturday, we met up at his dorm. As soon as I saw Steven for the first time in
Oh,
months,
my
I was
gosh.
shocked to see that he had dressed up as Ronald McDonald. Clearly,
Yep.
this was for a visual gag, but he did a terrible job on the costume. He looked like a dollar store nightmare version of the real Ronald McDonald, or like a roadside
Yeah, he's
junkie
real
who
scary.
robbed a party city and went crazy with a paintbrush. To be fair, it made me burst out laughing immediately, which made us both more hopeful that it would be a successful video. We put together his filming set so we could start as soon as we got back. Then we got into his car and drove to the nearest
Boy, get the
McDonald's. I've always felt
blicky?
bad whenever I made life more difficult for people working in the fast food industry.
I
could hear the
don't
deep
know what that
sadness and the
means.
intense loathing in the voice of the drive-thru worker when Steven ordered 2 of everything on the menu. Of course, it almost took an hour for them to complete our entire order, during which time Steven vlogs some of the behind-the-scenes action.
Bat?
Once we
Oh, you
finally
meant to
got
say
our
bat.
obscene
Okay.
amount of food, we drove straight back to the dorm and covered the
Yeah,
entire folding
I
table
mean,
with a
but at the
ridiculous
same
display of
time,
McDonald's.
it just
Then
seems
we
so
sat
far that
down and
he's,
started
other
filming
than
and
a
got to it.
strange
We both fasted all day and skipped dinner the night before, so we would be super
outfit
hungry whenever
that-
we got to the mukbanging, which meant we started out eating very quickly.
He's
I've never
just
been a big
feeding
fan
him,
of
so.
McDonald's, but those first 3 or 4 burgers were delicious. After about 1,000 calories, though, I started to slow down. On the other hand, I don't know what Steven was on, but he was like a bottomless pit. He wasn't slowing down for anything. He kept egging me on to keep going.
What are you slowing down for, bro? Go big or go home.
It's so much food, man. We barely made a dent.
Exactly. That's why we can't quit now. We haven't even gone through the burgers.
If I eat one more burger right now, I'm never gonna eat another burger in my
bloody
life.
demon. Yeah.
Fine, you big baby. I'll finish the burgers.
Yeah, he seems
You
like a
get
bit of a
started on the
demon.
nuggets.
All right. By then, the nuggets were cold and tasted like cardboard.
Bleh.
The only thing that made them
Cold
edible
nuggets
was
are
dipping them
gross.
in an excess amount of sauce. I ate 10 nuggets and then started munching on fries because I couldn't stomach anything else. Before long, I was starting to feel physically ill. I put my head on the table just for Steven to start flipping out on me.
Hey, you can't sleep. Look at all this food that's left. Why are you quitting on me, man? Go big or go home.
This makes me think this
I
might be
can't,
why he
man.
couldn't get
I
anybody
just
to
can't.
agree to
I
this.
think I'm gonna throw up.
Only
Cold
if
fries
you
are
stop.
not
You
good
gotta
at
keep
all.
stacking
They're
food on top to
gross,
push down
especially
the stuff on the
McDonald's
bottom.
fries. When they're cold, they're
I don't
basically
think that's how it
inedible.
works, man.
Stop! Stephen McDonald
Why won't you
knows
eat alone,
best.
bro?
Isn't that
That's
right,
a good
folks?
question.
Look at this quitter.
Why didn't
Everyone
he eat
boo the
alone? He
quitter.
seems perfectly
Who are you
capable of
talking
it.
to?
Given how much he ate earlier, why wouldn't he just eat it all on his own?
Bro?
The audience, duh.
Oh man, I think I'm gonna be sick. I gotta go to the bathroom.
Oh, no, you don't.
I tried to get up so I could go throw up in the toilet, but Steven jumped up and grabbed me.
Oh
You're
no.
not going anywhere.
He
Keep
is.
eating.
Then he started shoving McChickens
Black
into
hole
my
for a
mouth.
stomach. Yeah?
And out of everything on the McDonald's menu, I've always hated McChickens the most. There's just
Understandable.
so much mayo and soggy lettuce. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Eat.
Can we look at the inside of the burger on this particular frame because it's gray? Like the inside of that burger is all gray. It reminds me of that one episode. Yeah, that's trash. It reminds me of that one episode of SpongeBob. You remember where Mr. Krabs sells the Krusty Krab to the some kind of franchise owner, and he starts making Krabby Patties out of this gray stuff. Hold on. Plankton buys it. No, it's some other guy. Yeah, it was, he sold it to some other fish who rebrands it as Krabby-O Mondays, and this is what the inside of those burgers looked like. And you can see this versus this. They look pretty similar, don't they? Yeah, it is really nasty, isn't it? It does look like the same burger.
Eat. Go big or go home.
I tried to get Steven off of me, but it felt like the blood in my veins was turning into
Clown
concrete.
demon.
I didn't even have time to swallow
Yep.
one McChicken before he shoved the next one into my mouth. I couldn't even breathe. Once I started choking and gagging, it was over. A whole bunch of my stomach contents came up and it couldn't get past the blockage in my throat, so it all came out my nose.
Ew, 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 ew.
He finally let go of me and I fell to the floor as he went to grab the camera for some close-up shots of my embarrassing condition.
Look at this loser. You see, folks, this is what happens when you disappoint the Stephen McDonald.
What's
I
wrong
don't
with
know what
you,
you're
man?
asking me
You're
here.
sick.
Them, how are you
What's that?
live?
I can't hear you over the sound of you failing the mukbang challenge.
Steven even started throwing food at me and making sounds like How To Basic.
The dude.
That's when I knew I had to get out of there. As soon as I cleared my airways enough to breathe, I started
That
crawling
didn't
for the
clear
door.
anything up at all.
Steven filmed me, laughing like a sicko the whole time. I finally got to my feet and ran out the door. I stumbled home, looking like a complete mess. Obviously, I never associated with Steven again.
Good
and
call.
I recorded his video, and it got taken down.
Good.
I drove down the road while Ryan sat in the passenger seat, making sure that all our cameras were charged and our phones were connected to the internet. We had heard of this new mukbang YouTuber, Nick, and I'd shot him a message a few weeks back asking to collab. He agreed, and that's where we were headed now. Ryan and I were a YouTube duo that did a mix of vlogging, sketch comedy, and challenges. This would be our first mukbang episode. When we arrived at the address Nick had given
Oh,
us,
how he
we
didn't
gave each
choke.
other
Okay.
weird looks. His house didn't seem very intriguing. It was eerily quiet and the lights were all off.
If I had to take a
We
wild
turned
guess
on
on
our
why he
cameras
didn't
just in
choke,
case and proceeded cautiously.
probably because he
There was
somehow
no
managed
car
to
parked
get
in
the
front,
stuff
but I looked
blocking his
down at my
throat
phone
out.
and reread the message Nick had sent me just 10 minutes before.
Don't worry about knocking. Just come in. I'll be in the kitchen.
We opened the door and stepped inside. The house was empty except for a few food containers and bottles scattered everywhere. We exchanged puzzled glances, but Ryan shrugged his shoulders and we proceeded deeper into the house. The darkness was strange and bizarre, but we proceeded anyway. I nodded to Ryan and he grabbed one of our cameras from his bag and began to roll. Maybe Nick had some strange idea he wanted to try out. We rounded the corner and suddenly heard a noise coming
I
from the
think
kitchen.
this is red
We
flag
cautiously
number
walked closer, our
38
hearts
and
pounding as
counting,
we
and it's
entered.
only a
There
few
was no
minutes
one
into
in
the
sight.
video.
The lights were still off, but I noticed a figure sitting at the table in the dim light.
We're like sitting
It was
on the
Nick.
table.
He just sat there, motionless. We stepped closer, and that's when he finally let out a loud scream and lunged at us with rage.
What the heck?
Nick, it's Jared! Hey, man! I stumbled out of the way before I could finish my sentence. My
That's
heart
beyond a
thumping
red
as he swung his
flag. That's
massive fist at
straight
me.
up assault.
His body was huge and took up a lot of the room. His eyes were bloodshot and cloudy. In the dim light, he seemed almost monstrous, his folds swaying with his body
Red
as he
flag
swung
number
toward me. Each of his hands the size of
3455.
my
Massive
head,
dude
his
trying to
atrocious
eat
hair
you.
scraggly and dark in the fading light.
That goes
Jared,
beyond a
man,
red
what's going
flag.
on? Let's get out of here. I dodged past the hulking figure again as he hurled dishes and food at us. We sprinted out of the kitchen, across the hall, and out of the house as fast as we could. I was terrified as I ran.
Black
quickly
flag?
realizing
Yeah,
I had
okay.
forgotten where
That's the new coined term for whenever things go beyond a red flag. It's a black flag. Like death. So black flag number 6787 or something. This guy is very clearly violent and seems to be trying to eat this poor guy and his friend.
the exit was. Luckily, I soon saw the door and
Yeah?
we ran for it. As soon as we were outside, I looked back to see the massive figure of Nick chasing us down. His thudding footsteps
I don't like
got
how the
louder, and I
person in
leaped
this
into the truck,
is
urging
named
Ryan
Nick.
to
I
follow.
think Nick's a
Get
good
in,
name
get
for
in.
good
As
people.
soon as Ryan had stumbled into the passenger seat, I turned the key and revved the engine, reversing out of the driveway. As I did, however, I saw the garage door of the house open. Nick leaped into a van
How
that was parked inside.
how can a
and
person
sped out
that
of the
fast
garage,
run that
chasing
fast?
after us. I drove as fast as I could. my
No
heart pounding
clue.
in my
That's a
chest.
very good
As we approached a
question
red
that
light, I got
we're
ready
not
to
gonna
swerve
answer
around
because
it,
I
but
don't
a
know.
large semi was heading toward the intersection.
But we're getting a
She's
little
cheating on
clogged
us,
in the
bro.
chat
Come
here, so
on,
I'm
what
gonna
are you
clear it
doing?
real quick.
With a sickening thud and a lurch, I felt his van collide with our truck. I revved the engine again, speeding through the intersection as soon as the semi had passed.
We gotta get to the police station, man. It
Oop.
should just be down the road a bit.
With a final burst of energy, I drove as fast as I could down the street. We were
Sense
almost there when
bots?
suddenly I heard Ryan curse and I realized the van was no longer behind us. Nick
What do you
had
mean?
pulled his van up side by side with our vehicle and he swerved the wheel.
Why would a
his
bot
eyes
be in my
wild as he leaned out of
stream?
the window and yelled something incomprehensible. As his vehicle collided with ours, I swerved off the road, my tires crunching on the gravel. When I looked back, I saw him leap from his van and run towards our car.
Lock the doors,
Oh
man.
yeah, that's fair.
I locked the
Eh.
doors as Ryan had said.
If there are
just
bots
in
on my
time.
stream,
In an instant, the massive
yes,
man was against
drive,
the windows,
drive, drive,
smashing
go,
his fists
run,
at the
drive,
glass and
drive,
making it
drive.
crack. But then suddenly, his eyes went blank and he stopped pounding on the window. He
Why?
just stood
What the
there,
hell?
his body limp and his eyes staring off into space. We both sat there for a few moments in stunned silence.
I know you're
before I
not a
slowly
bot.
opened the door. When I approached
Jazz
him, I noticed that
Lorenzo
he was
288
trembling
doesn't
and
seem
muttering
like a
something
bot.
to himself. It looked like he was having some sort of episode. I didn't
That's why white
hesitate.
people die in
I
horror
wasn't sure
movies.
if he was pretending or
Yeah,
not,
us white
so I
people
called the
do
police
die in
anyway.
horror movies a
Hello?
lot because of things
911?
like this.
I need help.
I explained what had happened, and soon a police car was on the way. I stayed with Nick until the police arrived. He seemed to have calmed down, but he just kept repeating the same thing over and over. I couldn't make it out, but it almost seemed apologetic. As it turns out, it wasn't his fault. Apparently, he had been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia disorder and had never received treatment.
Oh.
A few days later, I heard that Nick was
Okay.
doing better. He was undergoing treatment, and he seemed to be doing a good job of managing his condition. Ryan and I were happy to hear the news,
Oh,
but
he looks a
I'll be
lot better
honest,
now.
I'm not going to collaborate with him again.
Yeah, no, I don't trust it either, I'll be honest. Alright, that was another from IMR Scary Tales.
The trucker tumbles to the greasy floor of the
This is
diner.
an SCP file, SCP-4258. Also known as Freddy's Diner. This video is by Dr. Bob, who's been on this channel before in the SCP file for the Orcadian Horseman. So let's roll.
Thrown out of his booth, only to come crashing down before he can regain his footing. He'd be climbing back to his feet, ready to square up to the patron who has just hurled him, but staring up at them has made him freeze on the spot. As he lies on the
Yeah,
diner
you remember
floor,
that one.
The trucker's eyes lock on to the
Fat
bizarre
man trying to
horror
eat you.
towering
Just
over
say
him.
sorry, hell no.
It looks like a huge fleshy mess, more akin to a chewed-up wad of gum than a living being. It's nearly impossible to differentiate what parts of its head are facial features. Is the mouth right there in the center, or is it one of the various other strange and inexplicable orifices? Does it even have a mouth? And where are its eyes? Does it have the standard human too, or does it see by smelling sounds or tasting the air? And are those tusks? They are. The trucker has only stopped off for a hot cup of coffee and a bite to eat. Now he's facing off against a puzzling creature ripped straight out of a David Cronenberg movie. But then again, that's what he gets for stopping off at Freddy's Diner.
Oh, yes,
It all
it
begins
is.
a few moments prior. The trucker is at the wheel, exhausted but making good
Massive
time on a long
flesh
haul across
blob.
the interstate.
Yeah.
Thanks to life on the road, he's been lucky enough to see much more of the country than most, driving from the west coast to the east coast and back again plenty of times. And being so familiar with his routes, the trucker has his very own curated list of the best places to eat while on the road. He double-checks the time and realizes he's got plenty to spare, so decides to make a quick detour and heads towards a little-known roadside
Oh, my
restaurant,
head.
Freddy's Diner.
Oh.
The trucker still
Ow.
remembers the previous time he took a pit stop in Freddy's place. It never ceased.
Sorry, guys. I'll be right back. I just got a massive headache. I gotta go get something to drink. Truck life must be nice, traveling place to place. It can be nice, but can also be really not nice. But I'll be right back. I gotta get something to drink. I'm back. Got water. Ugh. Stay hydrated. Hydration's important. We hydrate or dihydrate. Won't go to a place called Freddy's Diner on principle now. Well, the thing is, the food at the diner is still good and all. It's just also an interdimensional portal.
Ceases to amaze him that it even exists. After all, there's not another diner like it, from here in California to the truck stops over in New Jersey. And the trucker knows he'd pick Freddy's Diner over any maritime-themed novelty seafood place. He likes going there so much, he's even kept it a secret from his fellow truckers on the road. He'd simply hate for everyone to start piling over there and turning his favorite spot into a rowdy trucker hangout or tourist attraction. Pulling his truck up outside,
You don't
the
want to
trucker
meet
locks
the
vehicle up
flesh
securely
blob?
and heads inside.
Well, the thing
From
is,
outside,
again, it's an interdimensional portal place, essentially. The door entrance to the front leads to a bunch of different places. So you might meet the blob least if you're unlucky, or you might be very lucky and not meet anybody at all. Other than Freddy himself, of course.
It's just a calm, quiet-seeming place, a diner like any other in that stereotypical 1950s style. That's part of what the trucker likes so much about Freddy's. It's got that
Right?
comforting, nostalgic feeling to it. like one of the few remaining vestiges of an era that nearly nobody alive remembers.
Don't be
anymore,
weird.
except
We
from
are
seeing
only
it
about
secondhand in
possum
old
girls on
movies.
this
But
channel.
despite it looking quiet,
Nice, wholesome possum girl content only. No cat girls. Cat girls are banned.
practically empty from the outside, stepping through the doors at Freddy's is like setting foot on another planet. The entrance isn't just the way into the restaurant, it's the access point to the trucker's other favorite part about visiting there: the people. At first, it seems normal. There's always a decent number of customers bustling about, talking to each other or ordering from Freddy, the friendly, silver-haired old owner dressed in his typical pinstriped apron over a shirt and bow tie. No matter if he's in the middle of serving a customer, Freddy always turns to greet the newest arrival with a warm smile and his classic motto.
Or end up a
Welcome to
video game.
Freddy's
Yeah,
Diner.
that could be
The only-
fun depending on the video game. Like, maybe Minecraft would be fun. Doom. No, Doom wouldn't be fun to end up in. The thing is, you go out the door and you end up back in the same place you came from. Halo. If you're a Spartan, yes. If you're a normal civilian, no. Like, you can only enter and exit from the place you come from. Definitely not
Inflation,
Warhammer
youth, and
40k.
cuisine. That's
Warhammer
how your
40k is
The trucker
literally
loves how gradually it creeps
just-
up on him. Taking a cursory glance around the diner, nothing seems all that out of the ordinary.
oof.
But looking closer,
I know enough
he
about
enjoys
it to know
noticing
it's
the
not
other
good.
patrons and how eccentric they all seem. When taking a gamble on Freddy's and making his first ever visit on another long drive to California, the trucker finds himself convinced that there must be some kind of science fiction or comic book convention in town. Then, soon after, he starts to get a little worried, thinking that maybe he's been on the road too long and is starting to see hallucinations out of pure exhaustion. But now he's been in enough times to know the folks who pitch up to eat at Freddy's Diner. Well, the best way to put it is that they're from out of town. Wandering past the bar, looking for somewhere to sit down, the trucker notices a trio of figures sitting down and enjoying plates full of freshly grilled burgers and baskets of golden fries hot from the fryer. What does it
I'm
matter
not a
that
violent
all three are
person by
wearing huge,
nature,
bulky
honestly.
spacesuits with metal piping snaking down them and vents hissing out warm steam? They're just
Like, it
enjoying
might
their
be
meals
fun for
after
some
all.
people to try
The
their
trucker
luck
finds a
against the
vacant booth
corn
and sits down on the
cultists,
comfortable
but
leather seat, scanning the diner for Freddy so he can
doesn't
order
seem
a
like
coffee.
my kind of
Sitting
fun.
across from him at the opposite booth, his eyes fall across a couple, smiling and giggling to each other as they chat. He's so
I'm
caught up in
perfectly
their infectious
content to
positive
just
vibes
stay up in
that
my
he barely
possum
realizes
holes.
how one of them has had her entire right arm replaced with an intricate cybernetic one, or that the other is entirely blue and has pointed ears. It's just nice seeing how happy they are. That's when a voice that sounds like someone gargling water chimes up, and a sinewy tentacle grabs the trucker by his flannel shirt.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
The patron
Oh, there?
gurgles.
I got up to use the bathroom for 5 minutes and find some chump in my seat. That's my table, Pipsqueak.
Moments later, the trucker is on the floor, looking up at a creature he's never seen before. In fact, he's not even sure if the patron is human. Judging by the chewing gum head and the disproportionate limbs protruding from random points across its blobby body, it's a safe bet that it isn't.
If I had to go to a video game world, I'd prefer one that's nice and calm. You know, nothing too scary or threatening. It's something nice and peaceful, which is why I chose Minecraft. I could just go to Minecraft, live amongst villagers, and be a farmer. That's all I do. Just be a farmer. It's not peaceful all the time, but you know. I already make bread in Minecraft. You remember the
The trucker
infinite
stumbles towards the
bread.
bar and asks Freddy for a cup of coffee, a strong one, to wake him up in case he's dreaming.
Bar fight.
Across
Not
his
yet.
visits to the diner, he's been convinced that all the flamboyant and eccentrically dressed customers are all just wearing costumes, either for a local convention or because of an anything-goes dress code. But after seeing the patron, the trucker's starting to think that he might have been very, very wrong about this place. Not to be confused with a certain pizzeria populated with quirky animatronic characters, Freddy's Diner is a restaurant experience like no other. But if you're hoping to experience its comfort food and unique atmosphere for yourself, then you might have a hard time getting past the quarantine zone that now surrounds the diner, thanks to the SCP Foundation. Technically, Freddy's Diner is still very much in business, although you're not likely to see anyone stepping through or out of the front doors anytime soon. Well, not from this dimension, at least. Before it would go on to be known as SCP-4258, the SCP Foundation learns of this
Because it's in a quarantine zone. They just said it. They've cordoned it off so they can study it. That's like part of the whole point of SCP Foundation is to secure, contain, protect. They are containing it. That's the C. My neighbors are playing music.
seemingly innocuous restaurant 2 months after it first appears. To begin, none of the people that live in the nearby area pay the place much mind. As far as they know, Freddy's
Studying
Diner
for
is just a
30
harmless
years,
50s
that
themed
will
diner.
save.
Each and every one of them remains totally unaware that their memories have been tampered with, so that as far as they're concerned, SCP-4258 feels like it's always been a local staple, despite only having been around for a few short months. However, some new folks roll into town, and pretty soon the Foundation are getting rather suspicious about Freddy's Diner, thanks to abundant reports of a strange restaurant with weird cosplayers from the newcomers. They send in an undercover agent to investigate, making sure to be as subtle as possible. After all, at this point, there's still every possibility that Freddy's Diner really is just a hotspot for cosplayers and other eccentrically dressed individuals. But if only things were that simple. Inside, the agent is greeted by familiar, nostalgic surroundings. Circular seated bar stools, black and white tiled floors like a chessboard underfoot, a jukebox in one corner blaring out hits from the likes of Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley. Even the menu has all the old classics on there. Thick,
Just
frothy
keep a
milkshakes
garden
served in
side and
tall
erase their
glasses,
memories of
freshly made burgers
inclusion.
and fries. The
That
kind of
could
food that fits
work.
the atmosphere.
But there's there's always consequences to erasing someone's memories.
Of the 1950s. The thing that doesn't, of course, is the various, unusual customers that frequently eat at Freddy's Diner. Even without his extensive training in identifying anomalies, it doesn't take the Foundation's agent very long to realize that some of the people enjoying their meals inside SCP-4258 aren't all human. Some are. In fact, most of them do still resemble something close to humanoid. Although, upon closer inspection, it would appear that almost everyone in the diner has widely different physiology. Even those that look mostly human on the outside aren't a perfect match, at least by our standards. That's because everyone who
That guy who was just shown on the screen a moment ago, he's like the bug guy from that one movie. Sugar. Sugar and water. From our universe, at least. The rest of the universe can do whatever. I forget what that movie was called. You know, the one with the big bugs. Men in Black, that's it.
who visits Freddy's Diner has come from a completely different reality. SCP-4258 isn't your average diner. It's an interdimensional diner.
See?
People from all across the multiverse have made their way to this specific restaurant for a bite. And it's definitely popular with those that visit. Freddy's Diner might be the only restaurant that can claim to be multiversally loved, frequented by customers from multiple different dimensions all at once. Some days, you might see little more to indicate this than a few patrons wearing weird clothing, the kind that you've never seen before. A sight like that is easy to write off as a bizarre fashion statement after all. But on other days, when you find yourself enjoying a classically made milkshake at the bar, when a 6.5-foot anthropomorphic slime creature sits down on the stool next to you, then it becomes a bit more apparent that Freddy's Diner is anything but ordinary. And the agent sent to investigate the place by the Foundation quickly gets that very same impression during his first visit. Perhaps in an effort not to get swept up in the wondrous Mos Eisley Cantina energy of SCP-4258,
Can be
the
safe.
agent
Why keep it
approaches
from the
bar and
public?
begins
Because that's their whole thing. Even if it's safe, they keep it from the public. Let's take SCP-999 for an example. It's completely safe, and beyond just being safe, it's like a cure for depression, but they still keep it locked up. Yes, completely harmless, beyond harmless, helpful, but they still keep it locked up. Because that's just what they do, because they're a government thing.
To conduct an impromptu interview in the field. He talks directly with an old gentleman who appears to be running the place, the sole worker and owner of the establishment. The man the diner
5
is
doing some
named
sick
after,
stuff there.
Freddy.
Yeah.
Although he'll later become known as SCP-4258-1. Freddy greets the agent with the same charming, well-mannered demeanor as all his customers, before the agent starts trying to get to the bottom of what exactly the place is.
It's a diner,
Freddy tells him after a quick chuckle.
they don't have these in your dimension, kid.
The agent clarifies that there are indeed similar diners elsewhere in this dimension, although they aren't quite like Freddy's. The owner reassured the agent that he's only kidding, and then delivers the diner's motto, which apparently took him a century to come up with.
Welcome to Freddy's Diner, the only place where you can eat cuisine that's out of your world.
Being well versed in the anomalous and aware of the existence of other universes, it doesn't take the agent very long to figure out that this diner acts as some form of multiversal junction point, a nexus where various different worlds can intersect. But Freddy points out that's not exactly entirely correct, but the agent has at least grasped some of the core principle. More than happy to converse with his new customer, Freddy explains that his diner exists in what is known as Todash space. This, according to him, is the space between dimensions, and the door to SCP-4258 does indeed connect to all sorts of drastically different realities. As the agent takes a look through the diner windows, he notices a change in the scenery. Where there was once the familiar setting of Earth, there is now a wide, sprawling desert that seems to stretch endlessly into the horizon and beyond. Just then, a tall humanoid figure wearing a mask steps into Freddy's diner, wrapped in extravagant robes. Freddy greets the newcomer as Quarelf. He's clearly a regular customer. The agent returns to questioning the old man, curious as to how the diner actually functions, and hoping to gain as much intelligence on the matter as possible for the SCP Foundation.
Yeah, it's sort of like
One
a
of the main
hub.
questions the agent wants answered is, if Freddy's diner exists between dimensions, how can the customers possibly pay for their meals? After all, even on Earth, there are multiple forms of currency with different competing values. Across an infinite number of entire universes, there's hardly going to be one multiversally accepted
Yeah,
form of
but
payment.
that's just not how it
Luckily,
works,
Freddy has an answer,
unfortunately.
even if it is a little abstract. As he explains it, the restaurant is funded, in a sense, by something called Empathius.
You know that happy feeling you get when you remember something nice or someone compliments you? The restaurant feeds off that. It's what keeps the place running.
Confused as to what he means, the agent asks for clarity. For a moment, it sounds like Freddy's diner extracts positive emotions from its clientele, like a leech draining blood. But Freddy assures him that it's not quite the same. The diner itself only takes away the excess Empathius, the positive emotions, that its customers experience from being there, enjoying their
It's
meals in
not
the atmosphere
evil,
of the interdimensional
but they still have
diner.
to keep it
Freddy
under
likens
wraps.
it to trimming the edges of a hedge. SCP-4258 doesn't rob people of their enjoyment, it just takes a little bit to keep the lights on. The patrons that visit only have to feel happiness, and that's the only payment for their meal that Freddy wants. That brings the agent to a final question. If the restaurant takes a little bit of Empathius as payment, then what exactly is Freddy? The owner chuckles and says that he's just an old man looking to make good food. Speaking of which, he offers to take the agent's order. Not wanting to be rude, the agent asks for a hamburger and fries to go. He tries to see if there are any other staff working in the kitchen, but there doesn't look to be anyone at all, save for a pair of transparent hands that place a plate down.
There's so many cool things I'd love to see out in the world. Like, I'd love to go to a Freddy's. It looks like a good burger. Much better than the last burger we saw, right? Oh my gosh, that thing looked nasty.
Down on the kitchen line. Foundation researchers conduct a few different tests on the food that the agent received from SCP-4258, but their analysis quickly reveals that there's nothing harmful about it at all. It's just a well-made burger. The
It
agent
looks
is subsequently
good.
sent back to the diner
Look at
to
that
gather more
bun. Looks
information about it.
delicious.
This time, he's given instructions from the Foundation to change up his approach.
Speaking of delicious food, I had something really tasty today. So, oh yeah, they would. But again, Okay, hold on. Sorry about that. But yeah, there is most likely, if not definitely, some way to cure cancer in the SCP Foundation facilities. But their whole thing is to keep all this in the dark. I know. But this is just unfortunately how things work. But back to what I was talking about. I ate a nice custard from this little food market near where I work. And it was so good. There was a lot of it, though. I wish I cut it in half and gave it to someone else. Evil government. Yep. That's government. But, I also had a banana flavored drink, and I'm still burping up banana, which isn't bad. I like banana. Banana's a good flavor.
Approach and speak with some of the customers instead to see what they think of Freddy's Diner. After all, despite his friendly demeanor, the old man could always be a liar, trying to cover up a more sinister nature to his restaurant so he can lure in more unsuspecting people from across the multiverse. Although the agent has little reason to suspect anything untoward about SCP-4258, the Foundation is nothing if not thorough.
Yeah, as
During
long
his
as the
second
big
visit,
company
the
has
agent
enough
sits down with one of the
money to
customers-
keep the government from shutting them down, they can make as crappy as food as they want. The small company never makes enough money to cover that. So they go out of business. It's just a whole thing. Better than feet flavor.
Enjoying a
Yeah.
meal at Freddy's Diner.
Yeah.
A humanoid being whose body is
I could not
composed
imagine my
entirely of
breath
different
being
types of
foot
stone.
flavored. That'd be so
Just
nasty.
from a cursory glance, there looks to be a mixture of basalt, granite, and limestone all over the entity, who introduces itself as Rock.
Soon Disney will fall?
The agent
I
starts
hope
by remarking that the
so.
creature
That
has a very
bloated
interesting name.
rat carcass needs to go away.
His name Rock.
Pushing for more information on the creature's universe, the agent decides to ask if Rock's homeworld has a name, to which the reply is
Rock.
As far as the agent can attain from Rock's fairly blunt description, the stone entity originates from a universe that lacks any life forms with flesh and blood bodies, or
Fox
squishes,
Universe?
as Rock refers to them. It also states, with a similar lack of descriptive detail, that its home universe also lacks anything resembling vegetation. There are no trees or plants, which means that the denizens of this dimension
Never heard of
only
Fox
eat.
Universe.
Rock. Very delicious, yes.
The agent submits a proposal to the Foundation for a third visit to Freddy's Diner, writing in his report that his latest interview has proven to be completely useless.
Fox
Although it does at
Century,
least
there you
provide
go.
one interesting detail about SCP-4258, besides all the facts about rocks. It seems that everyone within Freddy's Diner, regardless of which dimension they originate from, is capable of understanding each other. It's almost like a multiversal translator is in effect within the restaurant itself to make it easier for Freddy and his patrons to communicate. Returning to SCP-4258 for a third time, the agent finds himself striking up a conversation with a rather familiar face. His own.
Bum,
Against the
bum,
improbable odds of
bum.
infinite different people across an infinite number of universes in an endless multiverse, the Foundation agent happens to bump into one of his own counterparts from an alternate reality. And for the most part, this alternate agent seems to be from a universe that is practically identical to the first agent's. The two men sit down and begin to have a friendly discussion almost immediately after entering
Oh, we got
Freddy's
another
Diner.
viewer.
After all, it's likely that nobody else in the establishment is as familiar with each other as the pair of them are. The first agent is quick to remark at how strange this
Meeting your
encounter
evil
is,
clone.
even amongst
Yeah,
his own years of experience
probably
at the
not.
SCP Foundation. Working with anomalies on a day-to-day basis is strange enough, but interviewing an alternate version of yourself has to be a jarring experience to say the least. The agent tries to establish any major differences between their two universes, asking his counterpart who he works for in his reality. The alternate agent explains that he also works for the SCP
This
Foundation,
part gets
or another
confusing.
version of it. So far, no differences. Next, the agent asks a more personal question. Is the alternate agent married? It turns out he is. As a matter of fact, they both are. And their wives are not only alternates of each other, but both versions of the couple have been together for 20 years.
Aw.
Next, the agent asks his interdimensional doppelganger to describe his world in more detail. More than happy to oblige, the alternate agent describes that in his universe, it is currently the 21st century. Most of the socio-economic issues faced in this dimension are the same as this one. Political corruption is rife. There are shortages of essentials like food and water in many countries, along with various other problems. But, the alternate remarks, there are good things there too, like Shark Week. That sounds fairly close to our world, the agent observes. Seems like there aren't any noticeable differences between the two.
Until...
Pretty funny, huh? His alternate reality counterpart replies. It is at this point during the interview that Freddy comes over to give the alternate agent his order. A burger and fries,
Shark Week.
presented in delicious fashion.
Yes, Shark Week's great. I love sharks. And don't act like you don't love gummy sharks.
On a plate. Awesome, thanks, Fred. The alternate
Shark
agent
Week
says
is fun.
before turning to his food. Time to chow down.
This
Then,
is where
the
things
alternate
get weird.
agent's jaw proceeds to unhinge, revealing multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth hidden behind the front-facing human set. He lifts up the plate and begins to violently consume the burger and fries he ordered. Having devoured the meal in a matter of minutes, the alternate agent then eats the plate his food was set out on, crunching down chunks of ceramic. Returning to the Foundation,
So, apparently, that's the only real notable difference between the two realities, is that. Oh, we lost that viewer.
the
Bye.
first agent later requests to be administered with amnestics. His request is denied. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-5126, Eat Your Mattress.
Don't eat your mattress. That'd be a
The
bad
night
thing to
watchman's
do.
hand shakes, shuddering the beam from his flashlight. He can't believe his eyes. Never in all his time on the job has he ever expected to see something like this. It can't be real. It all begins earlier that night. The newly hired watchman arrives at the site of his new position, guarding a Chuck E. Cheese after dark. It seems a bit excessive, even he thinks so.
You wouldn't be bothered by meeting a shark-like human? Yeah, I mean, as long as they weren't outwardly violent towards me, I don't think I'd be bothered by meeting anyone who looked like anything, really. Like, as long as they don't straight up try to hurt me. Different universe, different evolution, right? There's probably a good evolutionary reason for people to have teeth and jaws like that. Maybe food's different there. Maybe there was a different path. And that's why multiverse theory. Big jaw used for hunting? Like a snake?
After all, it's just a restaurant with some arcade games and admittedly creepy animatronic entertainment. Why would it need a dedicated person to keep an eye on it overnight?
I'm glad
Sitting
Chuck E.
down in a
Cheese is
security office,
mostly,
he sips his
you know,
coffee in front of
going
the
out of
TV monitors.
business.
Grainy footage from all the building's security cameras flickers on screen. He stares at the display, but doesn't really see it. The night watchman's eyes glaze over. He's already bored. In his boredom, his mind starts to wander. He thinks back to the wanted advertisement for this posting. It had mentioned several reports of movement late at night within the restaurant. None of it made much sense to him. Who'd want to break into a children's restaurant in the middle of the night? Probably just some teenagers, he thinks. Suddenly, a loud noise startles the night watchman. The sound of something metal clattering to
Yeah,
the floor.
humans
It's coming
now
from the kitchen.
from
Someone's still
100
here. He
or
grabs his
1,000
flashlight
years
from his
ago are
belt
very
and rushes through
different.
the restaurant, leaving just before a shadowy figure passes one of the security cameras.
Oh
The night
man, it
watchman
smells
clicks
like
on the
food's gonna be
flashlight
ready
and starts to
soon.
search, the light from it casting creepy
Oh,
shadows
boy.
as it falls over the various robotic animals. They give him chills just to look at them. He can't imagine that kids ever enjoy seeing the characters flap their mouths to weird, annoyingly catchy songs.
Hold
enjoy
on,
seeing the
hold on,
characters flap their
hold on.
mouths to weird, annoyingly catchy songs.
Bro be looking like Frida Kahlo. Shoot the robots? Probably not a good idea. It's not the robots we have to worry about here. But look, he got a monobrow. Oh. Weed and lungs? Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. He does look high.
songs.
But then again, when
Another-
they're deactivated, animatronics kind of just look high.
Noise, footsteps this time. He turns towards the back of the restaurant, the kitchen, where greasy, unhealthy junk food is prepared for hordes of screaming, rowdy children.
Yep.
Stepping out of the dark but brightly decorated main restaurant area into the kitchen, with all its stainless steel work surfaces, was like suddenly arriving on another planet. Instantly,
Yep.
his flashlight falls over what had caused the first sound. A trash can, toppled over to allow someone to rummage
Going to
around
the
inside.
back.
There's a trail of garbage, and the night watchman follows it. It leads him
Now
around
you
the
just
parts
want
of
to
the
hear a
building reserved
robot
for
say, "Holy
employees,
shit,
and then
I'm
back
high
out
as a
towards the
kite."
restaurant. The
That
man
would be
follows
pretty
the
funny.
closer he gets to the play area, a brightly colored foam pen,
Unfortunately, I
where
don't
overly
have any
energetic
voice
kids can run
modifiers,
around
so I
freely,
can't do a
giving their
robot
parents a
voice.
momentary break as they burn off all the sugar and calories from the low-quality food. But as he approaches the ball pit, he sees it. It's like an occult ritual, a circle of almost 20 children hurling slices of half-eaten Chuck E. Cheese pizza into the ball pit. Not one of them notices him, too focused on their strange ritual to even register the light from the flashlight. The night watchman is about to call
like
out to demand to know
zombies.
what the heck is going on, how they all got in here, and where their
Universe
parents are. But then, he sees something beneath the
2379,
plastic
the weed
balls. Something
superpower.
is stirring, moving in response to the children throwing pizza into the pit. And as it crawls out, the night watchman is met with the sight of something vile lurking in the ball pit.
There's
Stumbling
always
upon
something
what looks to be
gross in the
secret
ball
meeting
pit.
of a bizarre ball pit cult is hardly something that the average night watchman or security guard will ever have to experience.
Smoke
Even one
weed and
working for
become
an
a
establishment
superhero.
like Chuck E. Cheese,
That
the very
sounds
worst
like
they
a
might find
cool
themselves dealing with
story
is
idea,
particularly rowdy
actually.
customers, or the restaurant's animatronic characters getting a little quirky at nighttime. But thanks to the SCP Foundation's investigations into this particular branch of Chuck E. Cheese, they've uncovered exactly what it is about the building that draws such unusual attention. You see, there really is
But
something
the
lurking
only
beneath the
problem
ball
with that
pit,
is I could
something now
see
known
the
as SCP-6059. Here at the
shoot
SCP
the pizza
Foundation,
monster.
The, securing of
The thing
anomalies
is, it's
one of the
pretty
core
much
tenets of the
harmless.
organization. After all, that's what the S.
It's basically just like a child. An anomalous child, but a child nonetheless. And it's not really a pizza monster. Answer to anything is shoot it. See now, that's not right. 'Cause like, there are more answers. Violence isn't always the answer.
And the name stands for. And as
Children
such,
are
the
not
Chuck E.
harmless.
Cheese
No,
containing
they're not
SCP-6059
harmless. But you know
had
what
to
I
be
mean.
requisitioned. Fortunately, the cover story of the restaurant shutting down after a major health code violation seems to have been a believable ruse. And after all, it's not too far from the truth. You could say that the place does have something of a pest problem. Now that it's no longer a restaurant and arcade, the site serves as a Foundation facility.
Show weakness
established
to a child and
specifically
they will
to
destroy you.
research
Show weakness to the wrong
SCP-6059.
anything and it will
Following
destroy
some extensive
you.
analysis, researchers have determined what drew the cult-like group of children to the ball pit in the first place. It isn't an anomalous property of the building itself. There's nothing unique about this former Chuck E. Cheese franchise that causes such abnormal behavior. That all comes from the thing living in the ball pit.
Death by a rat.
SCP-6059 is a particularly unusual creature, and not just to look at, although it's certainly not easy on the eye. In fact, it's been known to turn more than a few researchers' stomachs around the facility. Its amorphous body is around the size of an average human toddler, but if you were expecting it to resemble anything made of flesh and blood, then well, you might be disappointed and possibly put off your food. Structurally, the creature is comprised of a mixture of discarded and stomach-churning substances, primarily pizza sauce and plastic, along with various other waste materials. The plastic component is visible in the form of
Essentially, worse, death by a banana. That feels a bit out of context. But essentially, this creature is made out of anything that would be waste remnants near the bottom of a ball pit. So, anything you could imagine in the bottom of a ball pit. is what this thing's made out of. Yep. They did say waste products. Yep. Although I probably would not recommend eating it. Yeah, probably. Though I wouldn't recommend putting a child that's still in diapers in a ball pit. Why would I recommend not eating it? Because it's bad for you. It's gross.
Of 2 of the plastic balls from the ball pit where it resides, placed on top of SCP-6059's blob-like head. Each one of those 2 plastic balls sports a hand-drawn pupil to resemble the creature's eyes, although no one is quite sure if SCP-6059 can actually see out of these or if they're more for show. Despite the strange and unnerving state it was found in, and being generally pretty unsettling.
I didn't say I want to eat it. I said you shouldn't eat it. That'd be bad for you. It's gross.
To look at, SCP-6059 doesn't seem to be a violent anomaly. While not outwardly aggressive, it certainly doesn't reach the same levels of friendliness as other amorphous SCPs, such as the well-known and much adored SCP-999, the Tickle Monster. But fortunately, especially for those researching it, SCP-6059 has come pre-contained for the SCP Foundation's convenience.
Is for big.
What does that mean?
Sure.
Well, while it's not unheard of, not all anomalies come with their own
999
containment
plush?
cell.
I
No,
think
really, we
someone
are
made
joking.
that once.
SCP-6059 can't leave the ball pit. Despite the only thing separating it from freedom being a fence of thin, mesh netting and a pool of plastic balls that is only knee-deep, SCP-6059 is trapped. Although, that hasn't stopped the creature from claiming it is fully capable of escape. That's right, SCP-6059 can speak too, and it has something of a high opinion of itself as well. Something that SCP Foundation researcher Dr. Zacharias Rosemary has discovered through extensive meetings with the beast of the ball pit. Dr. Rosemary is sent to the Chuck E. Cheese facility housing SCP-6059 at the behest of the Department of Anomalous Ambassadors. This is a specialized research division within the SCP Foundation that intends to improve the direct communication between personnel and anomalies themselves. And what branch would be better suited for learning just why SCP-6059 had its own following of devoted cultists when it was first discovered? Stepping inside the room containing the ball pit, Dr. Rosemary approaches the net barrier between him and the creature within. As per the instructions he has been given only moments before, Zacharias carefully opens the entrance, sealed with nothing more than a simple zipper. Dragging it down, he slips through and stands surrounded by plastic balls, reaching up to his knees. He calls out, knowing the anomaly can hear him, trying to get it to emerge and engage in a conversation with him. Sure enough, only a few meters away, the plastic balls of the pit
Kids will
shuffle
follow
and then
anything?
part
Yeah.
as SCP-6059
That's
pops
why
its
the
amorphous
stories
head
of
out
kids
from
getting
below.
kidnapped
It
into
greets Dr.
vans and
Rosemary
stuff
in
are
an
so
enthusiastic,
prevalent.
almost accusatory way, demanding to know the answer to a strange question.
Thing in my pit. Are you balls?
Of course, being a human being and not comprised of plastic balls, Dr. Rosemary has no choice but to answer the creature truthfully. But this doesn't go down well with SCP-6059. The creature immediately becomes highly agitated, shouting at the researcher to get out and leave. To emphasize its distress, SCP-6059 even starts gathering the plastic balls from around it and hurls them directly at Zacharias. If you've ever had a plastic ball from a ball pit thrown at you, then you know that it's hardly a pleasant experience. Although those balls are only lightweight, with enough force behind one, they can certainly pack a punch. Dr. Rosemary makes his hasty retreat from the barrage of plastic balls back beyond the safety of the net fence. Once he's out of range, the formless, messy face of SCP-6059 seems to frown before it disappears beneath the surface of the balls once again. Several other researchers and other personnel from around the site make their own attempts to converse with SCP-6059, met with the same reaction. It clearly doesn't feel like talking. But now that he knows the reaction wasn't unique to him, Dr. Rosemary is reassigned to try
I don't
and
know
get
what you're
through
trying
to
to say there, but
SCP-6059
I'm not sure
again.
throwing
This
anything
time,
will
however, he's
help
come
here.
prepared. Based on their brief encounter, the anomalous being seems to be childlike in its temperament and prone to misbehaving. So Zacharias has devised a plan for his next interviews. If SCP-6059 starts
person.
acting
Oh,
out again, then the
midget.
researcher intends to treat it like he would a disobedient child by putting the creature in a timeout. Heading back to the ball pit for a second attempt, Dr. Rosemary is also armed this time around. Well, with a family-sized Chuck E. Cheese pizza, at least. And it's not exactly a weapon, more of a peace offering to appease SCP-6059. Or a sacrifice. Passing through the mesh netting into the ball pit,
Hey, we
Dr.
gained a viewer
Rosemary
again.
holds the
Hello,
box
new
just
viewer.
above the surface. Almost immediately, SCP-6059 bursts out and chomps down on the pizza box, yanking the whole thing back down beneath the plastic balls to devour it. Zacharias tries to encourage it to talk again, and SCP-6059 makes no secret that it approves.
You have appeased me with a sacrifice. You may speak, non-ball.
Straight away,
Kids
Dr.
with any
Rosemary wants to
candy,
get down
yep.
to business and asks the creature outright what it is, but the response is far from a coherent answer.
Tell me, mortal, have you ever had an enlightened experience in a pit?
Confused by what it means, the Foundation researcher tries to ask for clarity, but SCP-6059 has little to offer in that department. It seems obsessed with the contents of the ball pit, referring to the divine, higher power of the balls. Baffled and struggling to answer, Dr. Rosemary recounts an instance from his childhood where he got sick after playing in a similar pit in a McDonald's. This seems to be what the creature wanted to hear, judging by its response of,
Yes,
Kitty!
this is it. You have been touched by my blessing. You are a prophet of the pit.
The anomaly apparently implies that it is some kind of deity, or at least it thinks that it is, capable of bestowing a divine blessing in the form of illness, which seems appropriate since SCP-6059 looks like it's riddled with germs. But Zacharias points
Oh,
out
my
that the creature
kitty's
hasn't exactly
here.
answered his
I
question.
know.
Hearing this, SCP-6059 seems a little
Left foot.
confused, then pauses for a moment before hurling more balls at Dr. Rosemary and shouting again. He goes to leave the pit and warns SCP-6059 that if it doesn't behave itself, then he'll put it in a timeout. It responds by launching another
down.
ball and hitting the researcher right between the eyes. That settles it. The anomaly has earned itself a timeout. Putting his new plan into action, Dr. Rosemary shuts off the lights and leaves the room. SCP-6059 doesn't like it one bit, angrily throwing more balls at the mesh every few minutes, demanding that the lights be turned back on and that it be released from timeout. After a few short moments, it seems to settle and looks around in the dark for any sign of the researcher or any other members of personnel.
Please come back.
Now that he's shown the creature what the consequence is for bad behavior, Dr. Rosemary returns to the ball pit and sets out very clearly his expectations. It's very simple. As long as SCP-6059 behaves and cooperates, it'll receive pizza as a sacrifice. If not, should it decide to misbehave and act in a disruptive or disobedient way, then it will get put back in timeout.
Yep.
And surprisingly, the unruly anomaly agrees to adhere to these rules going forward. Their next interview begins much the same as the previous one, with Dr. Rosemary bringing another pizza for SCP-6059 to gobble up.
My
He
kitty.
asks if the creature is ready to
Kitty,
behave,
kitty,
to which it nods.
kitty.
Trying to be as amicable as possible,
Kitty,
Dr.
kitty,
Rosemary explains that they got
kitty.
off on the wrong foot and that they're going to start over. He tells SCP-6059 to just answer his questions honestly, and the anomaly agrees to his terms. Then, the researcher asks again, wanting to know exactly what SCP-6059 is.
I am Batulai, god of the pit. I hold divine power over the pit and all within.
This hardly explains much, apart from confirming that SCP-6059 does think
Bless you.
that it is some kind of god.
Bless you.
Dr. Rosemary presses it for more information, and the creature responds by describing the pit and its many balls as its domain that SCP-6059 oversees. It implies that the ball pit can bestow blessings of some description, but the Foundation has confirmed that it's just an ordinary ball pit. Next, Zacharias decides to ask if Batulai, SCP-6059, is the god of all ball pits or just this one, and comments that the creature hasn't made much attempt to try and escape its confinement.
Small kids
SCP-6059
playing
seems
with
to
their
take this
kids.
personally,
Toys,
insisting that it is more than capable of leaving the pit, due to being all-powerful. Dr. Rosemary challenges it to do just that, to which SCP-6059 responds by reaching for one of the plastic balls. He urges the creature to make smart choices. Putting the ball back, it confirms that its domain is just the one ball pit it currently resides in. Dr. Rosemary pushes for more information, although SCP-6059 is reluctant to give answers. It needs some gentle encouragement, shying away when asked why this specific ball pit. But eventually, Zacharias coaxes answers out of the creature. It says it just woke up there one day. It came into being within the filth and waste lurking at the bottom of its pit. Then, Dr. Rosemary asked about the children. You see, SCP-6059 is the reason the strange cult-like group had gathered in the ball pit. It has the ability to spread some kind of influence that makes anyone under the age of 10 start to worship it. This usually occurs after around 20 minutes of being near SCP-6059 and leads to those affected to form a circle around the creature while praising its might and power, as well as throwing slices of Chuck E. Cheese pizza into the ball pit as sacrifices to SCP-6059.
My divine servants, loyal subjects who sung my praises and brought me offerings. A god is nothing without followers. Followers spread word of your power and gain you influence. With followers, worshippers, you are remembered as mighty in the Pantheon. With worshippers, you gain offerings, and you live forever.
When Dr. Rosemary asks why children, the anomaly describes feeling a kinship with them. It's not hard to see why, given the creature's tendency to misbehave and overestimation of its own importance. Seeing Zacharias taking notes, SCP-6059 asks if the doctor has become one of his supposed followers. After all, Dr. Rosemary has brought offerings of pizza and seems to be writing down stories about SCP-6059.
Cult of kids?
I do
Yeah,
not
it's
feel
very
my
strange.
influence working upon you, yet you perform the steps of worship regardless. Have you accepted the glory of the balls? Have you decided to become a follower of mine?
Of course, Zacharias is just making notes of their interaction in the interest of research. He warns SCP-6059 not to overthink it before wrapping up the interview, once again leaving SCP-6059 alone in the ball pit. The security cameras observing the creature's chamber record it
Yeah.
becoming irritable at being left alone. It throws more balls at the mesh for several hours in an attempt to get someone to pay it attention.
Come back.
Then, it sinks back beneath the plastic balls. The very next day, there is a significant
kitty
difference in
paw.
the following interaction between SCP-6059 and Dr. Rosemary. The creature
Yeah, that's
actively
probably why it
requests-
didn't, come up as strange. Is that kids play weird games all the time. So it probably got written off as just a weird game they were playing until the moment they saw that it was happening at night.
to speak with the researcher. It wants to talk. Or maybe it wants the company, but can't quite articulate it. Agreeing to return
It
to
does
the ball
look
pit
like a
as
big
per
booger.
SCP-6059's
It probably has
requests,
boogers in
although
it.
assuming the creature might just be wasting his time for attention, Dr. Rosemary is greeted with a confession. The anomaly explains it has been greatly bothered since their most recent meeting. SCP-6059 explains that previously it has been content with its domain, not wanting for anything other than the pit and the balls within. It was content, and it managed to garner a small cult of worshipping followers, but now it feels as if something is wrong. SCP-6059 continues, describing the time when it first awoke in the pit. Back then, SCP-6059 has a feeling, a need for something, but it doesn't know what, and there is nothing it can do to stop this strange, unfamiliar feeling. All the newly congealed amorphous creature knows is that it is a divine deity. Around it is the ball pit, its domain. Eventually, the anomaly meets the children, and thanks to its influence, they begin to worship it. And it's their kindness and sacrifices that make SCP-6059 feel important. But once its followers are gone, and SCP-6059 is found by the Foundation, that same negative feeling returns, until it meets Dr. Rosemary. As the creature continues to explain, it describes how upset it feels to be left alone in the pit, and that speaking with Zacharias can alleviate that feeling.
Oh,
Then, when the researcher
sweet
leaves,
kitty.
the feeling comes back. It confuses and upsets a bewildered SCP-6059, but offers some words of comfort, and even another pizza. Dr. Rosemary explains that it's his job to take care of SCP-6059 and ensure the creature is okay. The anomalous blob rightly points out that he didn't have to come this time. After all, he could have ignored SCP-6059's request to talk. It wasn't required by the Foundation that Dr. Rosemary conduct an interview today. Zacharias puts it in simple terms.
Yeah, it
that
is like a kid just
SCP-6059
wanting
can
attention
understand.
from their
He
parent
agreed
or
to
a
talk not
friend.
because he has to, but to ensure the creature is all right and to learn more about it. But mostly because he understands SCP-6059 just needs a friend. To begin, SCP-6059 is unfamiliar with the concept. It's never had a friend before, only those that worship it because of its anomalous influence. Over time, the creature seems to have developed a sense of self-superiority because of this, believing itself to be a god. But Dr. Rosemary explains that a friend cares about someone not out of a need to worship them, but instead out of respect. Friends offer support or food
Yeah,
or
it
gifts to a
is
friend
more
in
like
need,
mother
not
and
out of
child.
obligation, but because it is the right thing to do.
But at the same time,
Zacharias
it's...
tells SCP-6059
he's
that
trying to
friends
keep
listen
it
to and
detached.
care about each other, not because they have to, but because they can.
Are you my friend, Doctor?
Naturally, Dr. Rosemary agrees, as long as that is something that SCP-6059 wants. In response, the creature playfully throws a plastic ball between the doctor's eyes. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-387, Living Lego. A young
Bye,
researcher
kitty.
is thrown against the wall so hard that his spine breaks. A man turned into a scarecrow. A woman unmoored from gravity. A man losing a vital component of his brain. All these poisoned prizes can be yours if you have your hands on a certain special object. The thief is confused, to say the least, at the sight before him. It isn't exactly what he has been expecting to find on his travel to the Forgotten Cave. The strange object is displayed on an altar, with a beam emanating from somewhere above,
Ooh,
shining
fancy
a bright
lamp.
column of moonlight onto it. This must be the treasure that he was sent here for. But what was this strange treasure? He's still aching all over from his long journey, many days and nights spent crossing the desert just to reach his destination. All around the cavern are precious stones and gold coins, jewelry and riches beyond the thief's wildest dreams, and it's all his for the taking, just as long as he fulfills his promise to the strange, decrepit...
If you met a creature with the mind of a child, and begin to grow a maternal instincts. Yeah, I suppose, but again, wouldn't maternal instincts mostly imply that the researcher was a woman?
old man he met at the entrance of the cave. The thief steps closer to the altar and examines the object the old man told him to recover. Upon hearing the word lamp,
Paternal. There you
the thief
go.
had been picturing an ornate oil jug with a handle and spout, not this thing. The thief had
I
never
mean,
seen
it's
an
still a
object
pretty
quite like
lamp.
it. It's a tall, thin neck that winds upwards from a flat, circular base. The top looks like the hem of a dress, but far smaller and made from green glass. It's a lamp,
Evil
all right,
genie. Yep.
not as this thief would know it. He lifts it up to get a closer look and notices something. An empty space beneath the stained glass lampshade. It looks like there's a part missing. Nearby, he comes across another curiosity. A rounded, almost perfect sphere of glass, with an elongated protrusion terminating in a metal connector. It seems like it would be the perfect fit for the vacant port on the lamp.
Does this guy
So, figuring out how
know
to
what a
fix the
lamp
two,
or
the thief
a
attaches the
freaking
to
light
the
bulb?
lamp. To his surprise, the bulb begins to glow a light blue. Cautiously, he places it back down and backs away, uncertain about what is about to happen next. A sudden plume of blue smoke
Oh,
erupts
boy.
from the lamp, and the thief ducks for cover, thinking the object has exploded. But there's no loud sound, no flames, and this prompts him to peek out from his hiding place to see a mysterious figure emerging from the cloud. It looks to be an older man, hovering above the ground, not legs, but a tail of the same smoke as the rest of his body.
Don't think
Now
you
the
should
thief
tell the
recognizes
joke.
what's going on. He's grown up with stories of creatures almost exactly like this one, and it fills him with a rush of excitement. It's a genie. He can remember as clear as day tales about genies. They are mystical wish givers, imprisoned within lamps and then bound to the person who discovers them. Once it emerges from its slumber, a genie will then offer whoever freed it 3 wishes.
Hey, you there. You gonna hide all night? Come on, kid, let's get this over with. What'll it be?
The genie asks rather brashly. The thief approaches the smoky, translucent figure and immediately knows exactly what to do. He's already thought of exactly what to ask for, the wish that can free him from his life of stealing and poverty. "Genie, I wish for you to make me rich," he says. As soon as he's finished his sentence, the genie vanishes, leaving the thief confused. Surely he still had another 2 wishes. He's startled as the light bulb he had affixed to the lamp suddenly explodes, for real this time, with a spark and a shower of small glass shards. Before the thief can so much as call for the genie to return and demand that it explain itself, he feels a sickly churning in his stomach. Something is very, very wrong. After a few short moments of violent and painful sickness, the thief lays dead on the floor of the cavern. If one from a more
Well-
advanced period of history were to examine him, they'd find the thief's body exposed to an extremely large overdose of vitamin C, enough to kill him. The genie had made him rich. It just goes to show the old warning to be careful what you wish for is always applicable, especially when you find yourself making a wish from SCP-4035.
So you made him rich
Although it
in
might
vitamin
look like
C.
an unassuming table lamp from the outside, within it stored an ancient entity who also happens to be wildly unpredictable.
Oh yeah.
And
Never
a bit
trust
of
a
a jerk, to
genie.
be
They're always
completely
gonna
honest.
fuck you up.
Anyone examining SCP-4035 will notice the first odd thing about it fairly quickly. The lamp itself is rather unremarkable, composed of a simple iron base with a conical lampshade above. Its patterned stained glass sports a number of shades of green, and overall, it looks like the type of lamp you might find at a grandparent's house, or a distant elderly relative who always tells you just how much you've grown when you visit every 5 to 10 years, and whose home decor hasn't changed since the mid-1970s. But the first of SCP-4035's many strange properties is that it doesn't actually seem to work. Closer inspection of the lamp itself will reveal that it doesn't
Explain
actually
it
have any
piece
electrical
by
components
piece.
whatsoever. There's no wiring running through it,
That's
no
what these
cable
guys
leading
do
to
for
a plug
me.
that can be affixed to a wall socket, no switch, nothing. Except for a standard light bulb socket. So naturally, anyone coming across this seemingly useless table lamp will feel compelled to find a light bulb and see if the thing actually works. That's when things get even stranger. Light bulbs placed into SCP-4035 will indeed illuminate, despite the lack of electricity powering the lamp. There won't appear to be anything unusual about its functionality at first, other than the bulbs inserted into SCP-4035 will produce a blue-tinted light. But surely that's just because of its ornate stained glass lampshade, right? Wrong. Shortly after placing a light bulb within SCP-4035, that's when he emerges. Who is he? Well, the Foundation knows him as SCP-4035-1, but for the sake of brevity, let's just call him the Genie. Emerging from the lamp will be an entity that seems to be gaseous in its composition, lacking a tangible, physical form, and instead appearing to be incorporeal, almost like a ghost, or a man made of vapors. This being has been described as having the characteristics of a
Oh yeah, it's kind of like a lawyer. They'll try to find a loophole in whatever you say, so you have to word it just perfectly, and even then they'll find some loophole that'll kill you or just straight up cause chaos.
middle-aged, balding man, looking to be somewhere between his 40s and 50s. Whenever he appears, the Genie always looks the same, always sporting a patchy brown suit coat. Beneath, however, he has no visible legs, and in their place is a cloud of blue gas that emanates from the lower body of SCP-4035-1. As soon as SCP-4035-1 appears, he will strike up a conversation with whoever placed a light bulb in the lamp that contains him. Now, you might be forgiven for perhaps predicting how the next interaction typically plays out. After all, you've seen Aladdin. A genie appears and offers to grant the person who discovered its lamp 3 wishes. However, the person making the wishes has to be very careful with how they word their requests to the magical entity. One wrong word, and they might find themselves suffering some unforeseen consequences. Or perhaps it unfolds like other myths and fables involving genies. The wishes are granted, but they come at a terrible, maybe even fatal, price. Well, you'd be almost right to expect something like that from this genie, but let's just say that SCP-4035-1 doesn't exactly enjoy doing things by the book. The genie introduces itself, usually under some randomly selected false name. Some favorites of his during past encounters have included Bobby, Spiff, Danny Fry, and Josephi Krakowski. Now you can see why just calling him the genie is a lot simpler. Anyway, after he manifests, SCP-4035-1 won't offer 3 wishes, but instead offers to sell a product to whoever placed a light bulb in SCP-4035.
Oh.
Attempts to ask the genie to elaborate on the product being offered are usually met with an evasive response.
Yeah,
and
very
little detail being
interesting.
revealed. Once the person or subject talking to SCP-4035-1
Huh? Food!
responds,
Food is yummy. Even in their culture, it says never be vague with your wish. Jinn are actually captured Jamons. Yes. And demons try to backstab you, as they do.
The genie then, in effect, grants their wish. They can just be trying to converse with the entity, but it will regard even a completely unrelated verbal response as an answer. The subjects typically receive a biological modification or other anomalous ability that directly relates to what they said to the genie, and we do mean directly. Once again, you might be forgiven for expecting that being granted supernatural powers by a magical genie would be a fun experience. After all, who doesn't want anomalous abilities? But be warned, the abilities SCP-4035-1 hands out usually fit the description of lackluster and disappointing. Why? Well, because typically, the anomalous modifications the genie makes are highly detrimental to the subject in question. You see, SCP-4035-1 has a habit of taking things extremely literally, almost to a pedantic extent, intentionally misinterpreting and leaving any who accidentally make a wish with it harmful changes to their minds and bodies. And like most genies from mythology, this one doesn't undo the wishes that it grants. After bestowing someone with abilities that usually leave them in agony or distress, the genie disappears back into SCP-4035, causing the light bulb inside to violently explode. Should someone attempt to replace it and get the genie to reverse whatever horrific change it has made, its voice will emanate from the lamp and yell,
Sorry, kid, no refunds.
but how bad could these abilities possibly be? Well, to find out the answer, you only have to take a look at a select few of the numerous tests the SCP Foundation has done involving SCP-4035. Dr. Bannock, at one point in time, is assigned to be the
That
head
is
researcher
perfectly-
in charge of conducting experiments on SCP-4035.
Exactly.
The approach he takes is sending members
Oh,
of
we have
disposable
5 viewers.
D-Class personnel to interact with the lamp and genie, then
You
record the
capture a
results.
demon and you try
The
to
first
bend it
test
to your
unfolds as
will,
follows.
it will try to find a
The
loophole
subject,
and
a
kill you.
D-Class with the designation number D4088, is sent into the containment chamber that houses SCP-4035. Dr. Bannock instructs him to place a light bulb in the socket and request telepathic abilities from SCP-4035-1. However, as the genie emerges, its sudden presence startles the D-Class, and he makes an expletive exclamation that we won't repeat. It was words to the effect of, "What the heck is this?" As a result, the genie grants D4088 an ability that relates to the sentence he said. And to call it particularly unpleasant might be something
Oh,
of
no.
an understatement. You see, because of a certain word the D-Class had used, the genie gives him the ability to identify the chemical composition of what we'll refer to as waste. The fact that he can even identify what kind of creature said waste comes from does little to make D4088 happy with his newfound power.
I mean, that could be
Dr.
useful.
Bannock is forced to refine his experimentation strategy following
He
his
knows.
bungled
Yep,
first
he knows
attempt.
his shit.
In the lead up to the second test, he informs the next D-Class candidate of what exactly they will be facing when they enter the chamber, so as not to be caught by surprise at the sight of the genie. As a result, the second D-Class subject repeats the process of activating SCP-4035 and calmly repeats the request for telepathic abilities that he's been told to ask for. "I'd like to be able to read minds." Unfortunately, his wording means things haven't exactly gone according to plan. Testing with this subject reveals he hasn't developed any telepathic abilities. Disappointed, Dr. Bannock has the subject released back into Foundation incarceration alongside his fellow D-Class prisoners. However, several weeks pass, and it soon becomes apparent what ability this inmate has been granted. He encounters another D-Class, one of many pulled from maximum security prisons around the globe. This particular inmate has a tattoo on his forehead of a few words in Chinese. However, to the former test subject, these phrases appear to have been translated to English and read, "Cuban butter mustache." When he reveals the mistake made by his fellow inmate's tattoo artist, the subject
Oh,
is
boy.
attacked and beaten up. He had, however, gained the ability to read minds. He can understand any form of writing on the forehead of a living being. A little time passes, and Dr. Bannock
Oh, you
finds
can
himself
feel your
still
face
struggling
again? That's
to get
good.
SCP-4035-1 to bestow any worthwhile abilities to test subjects. The genie just seems to take everything far too literally, interpreting every wish with no regard for normal speech and colloquialisms, even disregarding the safety of the person making the wish. Dr. Bannock conducts yet another test, sending a member of D-Class to speak with the genie and telling him to wish for muscle regeneration. The D-Class places the request with SCP-4035-1 seemingly without issue. However, Then comes the next part, testing whether this new anomalous ability actually works the way Dr. Bannock intends. The subject of this latest experiment is intentionally injured. As this happens, his body appears to rapidly change. His muscular system swells up and multiplies, increasing from its original size. A successful test, right? Well, it would be, if the rapid muscle regeneration actually stopped. Before long, the D-Class test subject's muscle tissue is almost 250% bigger than its original size, making it much bigger than the rest of his body, too.
Yeah.
The subject is clearly highly distressed, although fortunately, this doesn't continue for long. Unfortunately, that's because his body can't function normally with this new rapid change, and as a result, the D-Class subject's vital signs stop after 3 short seconds.
Yep.
Getting more and more frustrated
Still want
with the
that power?
disastrous outcomes, Dr. Bannock makes the decision to simplify the requests made to the genie. Surely it can't misinterpret one word, can it? The next test that Bannock conducts sees yet another unwitting member of D-Class, D-1899, entering the containment chamber and placing a light bulb within SCP-4035, just like her predecessors have done. She follows her instructions, and as the genie appears, she asks for one thing: flight. A short while later, the genie once again vanishes and leaves D-1899 with her wish. She has instantly become unaffected by the Earth's gravitational pull like normal. Within seconds, she is floating above the ground, as if experiencing the zero gravity of traveling in outer space. That certainly sounds idyllic, doesn't it? After all, who doesn't wish they could fly? To be granted the unique opportunity to view the majesty of the world from high above. Just one problem, though: getting back down. D-1899 quickly realizes, as does an agitated Dr. Bannock, that she isn't in control of her newfound flying abilities. She can't alter her direction or return back down to ground level at will. She's stuck, floating in the air, only able to affect her trajectory by propelling herself off of solid structures. The results of SCP-4035 tests continue to be somewhat undesirable, to say the least. An interaction with the genie that begins with the phrase, hey man, causes the D-Class who spoke to be suddenly replaced with a crude scarecrow.
Oop.
When another subject makes a wish for a new life, they die almost instantly, only for moments later, one of the Foundation's researchers to suddenly give birth to a baby with identical genetic makeup to the now deceased D-Class.
That's
Another
messed
test
up.
sees a member of D-Class personnel enter the containment chamber with the instruction to wish for whatever they can think of. Put on the spot, they're unsure what to request when the genie appears, and instead, they only offer up the response, I don't know. Moments later, this subject falls into a catatonic state and eventually passes away. An autopsy of the subject's body reveals that their hippocampus has been removed. Thanks to the genie, they literally didn't know anything.
Ah.
Further testing with SCP-4035 is later carried out. However, it should be noted that the next instance of a recorded experiment with the genie isn't one that was authorized by the SCP Foundation. Rather, hearing that there was a genie
No, I
being
think he's
tested,
just
Junior Researcher Jacobson
a
decides to
scarecrow,
try and
like
make
a
his
normal
ultimate wish
scarecrow.
come true. He's never been all that lucky in love, and it's left the young Foundation researcher with a little insecurity. Nothing that a visit to SCP-4035-1 can't fix, surely.
Oh boy.
Despite not being authorized to use SCP-4035, Junior Researcher Jacobson approaches the lamp within its containment chamber. He then repeats the process to make SCP-4035-1 appear, and then requests that the genie grant his wish. Make me more attractive? In an ideal world, this scenario wraps up with Junior Researcher Jacobson becoming more handsome by conventional standards, perhaps even improving his sense of insecurity as a
Oh
result.
boy.
But by now, you can
Attractive,
probably guess
like
that
magnetic.
isn't what happens at all. Instead, being as literal as ever, the genie grants the young researcher's wish and makes him more attractive. Seconds later, as soon as the genie has demanifested, Jacobson is suddenly flung across the containment chamber and smacked sharply against the solid wall. The sheer force of the impact gives the junior researcher a severe spinal fracture. Of course, this catches the attention of Foundation security, who bring junior researcher Jacobson to the on-site medical center.
Yeah,
There, he is
genies
given
are
a full
not
analysis,
nice.
and this reveals the extent of just how attractive the genie has made him. Junior researcher Jacobson's epidermis, his outer layer of skin, has been given properties similar to that of a high-powered magnet. He has been magnetically attracted to the metallic walls of the containment chamber, resulting in a spinal injury that would claim his life only 2 hours later. The extensive testing with SCP-4035 is still ongoing, and as a result, the Foundation sees it fit to keep a large supply of light bulbs near the lamp's containment chamber. Dr. Bannock's research seems to indicate that while a person is in close proximity with SCP-4035, they are more likely to suffer a sudden and inexplicable speech problem. For example, the most common of these are parapraxis, commonly known as a Freudian slip, or ankyloglossia, which is a condition wherein the skin joining a person's tongue to the bottom of their mouth is shorter than usual, and this affects normal tongue movement, sometimes being called a tongue tie. Being closer to SCP-4035-1 increases the chances of suffering some form of unintended speech mistake by 68% when talking to the genie. To cut a long story short, the genie doesn't just intentionally and obtusely interpret everything literally, but also directly affects how clear a person will be while making their wish. As for exactly where SCP-4035 comes from, there's little information available. Some theories suggest it might well be an actual mythological genie who is just tired of spending so many centuries in the business of granting wishes for mortals. After all, imagine you get trapped in a desk lamp for all eternity and have to magically fulfill the requests of anyone that comes across you. Living through that for so long is liable to make a genie bitter and petty.
Oh, yeah.
Then again, perhaps the genie isn't even really a genuine genie. It doesn't inhabit an oil lamp, but instead a broken table lamp. And instead of granting wishes in the way they're intended, it misinterprets and takes things too literally, leaving the poor fools who thought they'd be blessed with supernatural powers to deal with the consequences. But perhaps that's the point. If nothing else,
Some
the
things
genie
fix
residing in
themselves after a while.
SCP-4035 serves as a reminder of that important lesson: to be careful what you wish for. In any case, if we were going looking for a genie, we'd take the friendly Robin Williams type over this pedantic jerk any day. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-150, Body-Stealing Parasite, Ship of Theseus.
Yeah, I think everyone would prefer the Robin Williams version of a genie.
Reading isn't always helpful. If it's a good book, then you can read it. If it's runes on a half-crushed human skull, though, better to keep from reading it. This is what SCP-77 looks like, give or take. It's the upper part of a skull, which previously belonged to some unknown person. There are runes engraved on its surface, inside of which resin was found. Where it came from is not known. The runic inscription...
It's a spooky, scary skeleton skull without the jaw and a bunch of spooky runes carved into it with resin inside.
change every time a full moon rises over Ireland. That is, about once a month. Additionally, the text also changes on special
The
days of the
corn
calendar.
chosen scroll? I don't know
Mainly
who lost
during the
it.
periods of
Probably Dave
equinox and
from
solstice,
accounting.
each of which occurs twice a year. The rewriting of runes also occurs during all kinds of lunar and solar eclipses, even partial ones. But again, the eclipse should be visible. on
Lorgar?
Earth.
Yeah,
The
probably
runes have
him.
to be
Gosh
read
darn it,
aloud
Lorgar.
regularly. For this purpose, the Foundation utilizes D-class personnel. 3 times a day, approximately every 8 hours, 2 to 3 D-class personnel have to enter the facility's containment chamber and read the inscriptions loudly as one voice. But there's a nuance to it. The employees must be taught the language of the runes in advance, since one needs to know how to pronounce them. If this ritual isn't performed at least once a day, strange things will begin to happen to the skull. Luminous green steam will come out of the nasal cavity and eye sockets. This
Gross.
is SCP-77-1. Its physical characteristics are close to the properties of ordinary gas.
Runes
But
are
unlike the latter, the
just-
anomalous green vapor fills only the space that's in the field of the object's view. The spread of anomalous gas can be limited by various kinds of barriers that don't let light and air pass through.
English.
Granted, these precautions don't remain effective for long. Foundation researchers have already tried to put the skull in an airtight container, so as not to bother with the daily reading of the runes. After some time, So much green vapor accumulated in the container that the container simply burst.
Probably not.
Anything organic that comes into direct contact with SCP-77-1 is permanently altered. The only exception is the skull itself. The rest of the organic matter turns
Ew.
into a rotten potato mass with signs of late blight. Outwardly, it resembles sticky mucus with a very unpleasant odor. Just 1/5 of a teaspoon, which is about 1 cubic centimeter, of the anomalous substance can rot over 28 ounces, or 800 grams of any organic matter. Even though reading the runes blocks the release of the dangerous gas, the process itself still has a very negative effect on the health of D-Class personnel. They start to feel sick and feverish. Their heads hurt
Yep,
and they become
potato
dizzy.
death.
Their skin gets covered with a rash, and convulsions can start shaking the body. Sometimes their nose bleeds. These people's psyche is also affected. The employees lose their restraint and try to escape. These symptoms don't last long, and are especially pronounced if a person rarely approaches the skull. However, frequent and thoughtful reading also increases the negative impact on health. Approximately 60% of readers become allergic to any potato product. To reduce
Oh,
the
that
risk of negative
stinks.
consequences, potatoes were completely excluded from the menu at the research area. It's easy to guess where the object was found, given its reactions to certain astronomical events. This is Ireland, of course. Granted, the name of the Irish village where the skull was found is unfortunately classified. The locals worshipped the anomaly as a deity. They even built a temple specially for the skull, where they performed rituals every night. Interesting documents were found in the ruins of the local church, as well as in the library. According to records, the skulls existed since 1848, and may have been known even earlier. In those days, it was spoken of very well, and it was even called a defender. But then something went wrong.
Damn it,
Since
potato
1869,
cults.
the rhetoric regarding the object
Yep.
had completely changed, anger and fear having replaced admiring speeches. Foundation documents regarding the object also contain deleted data that leads us to another object, SCP-1689. It's a bag of potatoes that never goes empty. When
Ooh.
potatoes are removed from it, new ones quickly appear inside via some complex process. But I don't think these objects are really connected in any way. After all, the skull comes from Ireland, and the bag comes from the Siberian village of Krasovo. The reference to the sack of potatoes is most likely present due to the fact that the anomalous skull performed the same function for the inhabitants of the Irish village. For decades, if not more, it fed the local population, and also protected them in an unknown way to us. But then something changed dramatically. I can only assume that earlier, before 1869, the skull was intact, and tons of potatoes came out of it. In gratitude to the skull, the locals performed rituals every night. But then the potato skull was attacked by a late blight, a disease that harms many crops. The skull began to rot, and instead of potatoes, it began to produce green gas, which caused everything around to rot. But how could an ordinary Phytophthora spoil a powerful anomalous artifact? It's pretty hard to believe. There are two options
got more
here.
viewers
The first is
now.
that someone cheated in conducting rituals and reading runes. For example, they put the emphasis somewhere wrong, or mispronounced a word, or a single sound, or violated the order in the conduct of one of the rituals. After that, there was a malfunction in the system, and instead of potatoes, rotting gas began to ooze from the skull. The second option is that people angered the deity or spirit behind the skull. They didn't appreciate his provision of potatoes, and over time
Bleh.
became disrespectful to the skull. Punishment from the deity was not long in coming. The skull became cursed, but didn't stop demanding attention. If before you had to read runes to get food in the form of potatoes, now they must be read so as not to die from corrosive gas. Reading runes is far from the only precaution against the anomaly. It's currently being held in Research Sector 861. The skull itself is placed on a 20-inch, half-meter pedestal made of steel. It's located in a room about 96 square feet, or 9 square meters big. The 20-inch or half-meter walls in the cell are made of steel. The entrance door is made of the same material. It's completely sealed off and doesn't let in any light or air. This corresponds to some AH-37 protocol. There are 2 armed guards with a level 1 clearance on duty at the door at all times. Indoors, the object is monitored by a video camera around the clock. It's important that D-Class personnel come as close as possible to the skull while reading. The reader should be no more than about a foot or 30 centimeters away from the anomaly. The correct pronunciation during the reading ritual is checked by a microphone with a speech recognition function. To become an anomalous rune reader, an employee must train for at least a week. Specialists in linguistics make every effort to ensure this. They teach the staff how to read runes, paying special attention to pronunciation, since the dialect must also be appropriate. Since
Also,
anything
I
can
realized
happen to
today I
employees
got
from
another
this
follower.
category, there should always be at least 20 D-class personnel at the ready who can read and pronounce runes, or at least learning to read runic texts at the moment. In the case of SCP-77, it's safe to say that knowledge prolongs life, since trained personnel are prohibited from being eliminated, at least until the next rotation. Linguists are involved in more than just the learning. Since the runes change frequently, specialists must always be on the alert to explain in time how to read a particular symbol. Usually, they immediately figure out how to pronounce a new rune and translate it verbatim and in meaning. A special archive was created to store this data. What's more, all readers must understand the meaning of the runes they read, otherwise the restraining spell will not work. There's one question that haunts me. Who even owned this skull? Whose brain did it carry within it? And whose face was stretched across it? Since the skull is associated with potatoes and Ireland, then the person is related to these two concepts. Okay-ish hints, to be honest. The whole of Ireland is closely related to the potato, so these facts don't really narrow the search. Ireland and potatoes are like me and anomalies. They're inseparable. Their stories are closely intertwined. However, I will risk suggesting something. The skull probably belonged to the same person who first introduced the Irish people to this important product. As for who this hero was, there was fierce disputes. Granted, the majority still believed that it was not an Irishman, but rather an Englishman. Some thought it was Sir Walter Raleigh. Others blamed Sir Francis Drake. Still others blamed John Hawkins. In fact, some Spaniard most likely brought the potatoes, because it was the subjects of Spain who were the first in Europe to try potatoes. But where can one find this Spaniard now? Where the top of his skull is, I know.
God
But
of
what about his
potatoes.
personality? Now, I'm gonna tell you a completely crazy idea. What if there were never any potatoes in America at all? Suppose there was some person with anomalous properties or predispositions, and he lived on the American continent. When he died, the Spanish colonizers discovered that his body gave rise to a strange vegetable, which they later called the potato. The colonialists divided the remaining parts and sent them to different regions of the planet. The skull went to Ireland, other bones were spread across Europe, Asia, and Africa, and some remained in America itself. What do you think? Could this be the case, or is it already completely beyond all limits?
I mean,
but in
it's
reality,
not
all much
impossible.
simpler. Share your theories in the comments below.
The mobile task agent weeps in terror as the nightmarish cartoon figures surround him. In the middle of the bright pink, whimsical town, pulled out of your childhood fever dreams. Deformed childhood beasts drink greedily from a fountain overflowing with blood. But the
Oh, that's
agent doesn't fear
terrifying.
them. He fears Mr. Hister, the huge looming figure in the yellow cloak, brimming with tendrils, and that awful face beneath the hood, smiling its rotting smile. All around them, children stand trance-like for the ceremony, ready to receive their final judgment, as up above, a door made of mirror floats, surrounded by the suspended floating bodies of the people who
Oh,
were
great
so lucky.
heavens. Heaven's not
Mr.
involved
Hister
in
leans
this at
in.
all.
He's got a question to ask, and if the MTF agent can't answer it, something horrible beyond imagination is going to happen to him. That's just how it is when you're dealing with SCP-5853. SCP-5853 refers to a line of packaged taffy candies. Each package
That was a freaking mood shift. We're just gonna go past that, nuke the whole place. You know what? Yep, I'm agreeing with you there. Nuke it for
contains
more,
two
but
candies, one blue with a raspberry flavor and one red with a cherry flavor. The blue candy appears to have no anomalous effects or adverse effects at all, aside from getting stuck in one's teeth. However, the red candy is a different story.
Oh boy.
Anyone who consumes the red candy and recites a key phrase will be teleported to an extra-dimensional shape, seemingly identical to the location of Tiki Taffy Town, a 90s-era television show that advertised the candy and has been designated SCP-5853-A. It was the UIU, a branch of the FBI specialized in investigating paranormal occurrences, who first identified the anomaly after they noticed a correlation between the airing of SCP-5853-A episodes and the disappearances of children. The show
Oh,
and
boy.
its corresponding candy have been linked to approximately 3,500 child disappearances
Oh
between
my
the years of
gosh.
1994 and 1999. As the UIU looked into
You
unexplained
declare
disappearances during these
exterminatus
years,
upon this
the
world,
peculiar
condemning
pattern
1,000 souls to oblivion? Good call.
began to emerge among several cases. The missing child was most recently seen in or entering a kitchen pantry. The only evidence left behind was a pile of open Tiki Taffy wrappers, specifically the blue raspberry variety. Shortly before their disappearance, the child was watching an episode of the show featuring the character Mr. Hister, and the missing child's parent could hear the show's theme music just before the child vanished. After a UIU operative's child joined the list of missing kids, the case was turned over to the SCP Foundation, along with all of the UIU's findings up to that point. Though episodes of Tiki Taffy Town can no longer be accessed by the public or by anyone outside of specific Foundation-approved testing, there are descriptions of the show's
Search Dawn of War 2 Exterminatus cutscene. I'll look it up on. Huh? No, what were you saying? I have no idea. I'm gonna look it up on my phone. Because I don't want to get copyright strikes.
five main
I think you're
characters,
right.
or entities, included in the official file. They range from standard children's entertainment fare to imagery that is deeply disturbing. First, there is the fatherly, patient Mr. Squibbles, a bipedal humanoid with the head of a plush octopus and a wardrobe consisting of khaki trousers and a red sweater vest. He is responsible for imparting each episode's lesson. Next, there is Mrs. Bobble, a stereotypical clown with blue hair, white makeup, a red nose, and oversized
There is
multicolored
always
clothing.
clowns.
She acts as the questioner of the episode's theme or lesson, raising these questions with Mr. Squibbles. The source of mischief in Tiki Taffy Town is Kizzywink, a small entity resembling a bipedal feline with humanoid hands and an oversized head. Though the entity is mischievous, it is also benign and largely childlike in its behavior. Kizzywink has a companion named Franzipans, a small, round, plushy avian with a hammer in place of its beak. Acting as an annoying sidekick to Kizzywink, the entity will fly around the screen and hit the other entities with its hammer beak as a form of slapstick comedy. And then there is the infamous Mr. Hister. This entity is not depicted as overtly hostile, but its appearance is the most troubling in the show. This humanoid entity stands approximately 2.3 meters tall and wears a long, golden yellow robe with a hood. The
As if
entity
it wasn't
propels
crazy
itself through the world
before.
with tentacles that emerge from beneath its cloak. Any attempts to produce an official description of the entity's face have proven difficult, due to the notable video distortion effect caused when the entity enters the frame. The closest current description of its face describes it as resembling a misshapen, tumorous human skull.
Oh.
A standard Mr. Hister episode of SCP-5853-A begins like most children's shows, with vivid colors, pleasant lighting, and cheerful music, as the main cast teaches standard lessons such as how to tie your shoes, why it's important to brush your teeth, and the value of honesty. When Mr. Hister enters the frame, however, everything changes. The video quality dulls, the colors become oversaturated to the point of becoming almost nausea-inducing, and the contrast decreases dramatically. The visuals aren't the only thing that change in Mr. Hister's presence. The subject matter also shifts in tone, as Mr. Hister torments the rest of the characters with nihilistic and distressing lessons such as, "Your parents will soon die, and so will you, and I feel nothing but the nothingness," or the particularly evocative, "You may not believe in the slaughter, but the slaughter believes in you." When Mr. Hister leaves the scene, he always recites this phrase, "I shall now be departing to the land of right, with the truth of red to be my might." This phrase is thought to be related to the various child disappearances attributed to the show.
What in
On
the
January
world
4th,
is
2000,
happening?
lead researcher Frank Monroe conducted the first test involving SCP-5853-A, accompanied by junior researchers Tracy Klaus and Morgan Eskew, and supervised by Ethics Committee consultant Jennifer Lamb.
Klaus.
Monroe began the test with D-Class 643980 restrained to a detainment chair in the middle of an observation room, placed in
Like
front of a
Dr.
television set.
Klaus?
D643980 was also hooked up to standard medical equipment to measure his vitals, while the junior researchers scanned infrared, ultraviolet, and other frequency wavelengths of the television program for any anomalous activity. With this setup in place, lead researcher Monroe signaled for the test to begin. The television was switched on and began to play Tiki Taffy Town Season 1, Episode 3, the first on-screen appearance of Mr. Hister. As the episode began, everything proceeded normally, aside from a small increase in Hume levels. As it progressed, however, the D-Class became increasingly
I do not know who
agitated,
let the
his
corn
heart rate and
demon in
perspiration
the
increasing.
TV, but I would
demanded to know
assume
why
that
the
they
show
are
was
very
chosen,
not smart.
explaining that he had childhood memories of the program. His younger brother used to watch the show all the time, until he disappeared. Upon hearing this, Ethics Committee consultant Jennifer Lamb became visibly distressed, but advised the research team to proceed with the test in spite of this unforeseen emotional component. After the episode finished, D643980 was freed from his torso restraints and given a microphone, earpiece, receiver, and shoulder camera mount. He was then given a package of SCP-5853, at which point he remarked that he ate them as a child, but only ever ate the raspberry flavor, while his brother preferred the cherry. He was instructed to eat the cherry piece, then recite the phrase, "Flesh is not the truth." At this point, the theme song of Tiki Taffy Town filled the room, and the D-Class vanished from sight, disappearing from the observation room altogether.
Well,
Dr. Monroe
he
was able
dead.
to maintain communication with D643980 via the microphone and receiver, and the research team monitored his video feed. The D-Class began in a dark place, with one single stream of light splitting the center field of view. After some resistance, he continued into the unknown, stumbling out of Mr. Squibble's treasure chest. Upon exiting the chest, the larger landscape could be seen, an exact replica of the Tiki Taffy Town set, with a blank white backdrop covering any areas not usually seen by the audience.
Yeah, for now.
As the members of the main cast, with the exception of Mr. Hister, entered the area, the D-Class hid in the chest. The four chattered excitedly about an upcoming town meeting before Mr. Squibbles opened the chest and discovered the D-Class hiding inside. He was instructed to engage with the entities until the Foundation could come up with an appropriate extraction plan. The D-Class became distressed and swore, prompting Mrs. Bobble to turn a glowing red until Mr. Squibbles calmed her down. Kizzy Wink asked the D-Class his name, and he answered that it was Davy. At this point, the entities instructed Davy to follow them to the town meeting, where he would be their esteemed guest. Together, they left the house, entering an area made up of the miniature town from the show's
Always
opening
remember,
sequence,
there
only
are
grown to full
fates
scale.
worse than death.
In the background was the same vacant white backdrop, as well as seemingly infinite copies of the same town landscape. Davy and the group followed a long road toward a cobblestone town square. As the research team
Hide
watched
in
the
the
video
toilet?
feed, they could see that
Probably
other
not an
pathways in the
option.
background were
Vets
occupied
don't
by their
usually
own
have
versions of the main
bathrooms.
cast of characters, all walking toward the same central location. These groups were accompanied, much to the horror of the research team, by small children. Each of the houses along the path was printed with a number corresponding to an episode of Tiki Taffy Town that featured Mr. Hister. According to the research team's calculations, this amounted to 31 episodes of the show that were actively able to steal children. Dr. Monroe suggested sending in a mobile task force, but Jennifer Lamb refused to sign off on the request, concerned about the unknown nature of the location and the potential ramifications of sending MTF members inside. While the research team was debating about the next steps,
The thing is,
Davey
we
and
don't
his
know
new
if they can be
friends
affected
reached
by
the town
physical
square.
damage.
There were over 100 entities and 200 children gathered together there. Some children were weeping, others stood silently, eyes ringed with dark circles from lack of sleep. Every single one of them looked utterly terrified. The entities began to chant together, "I now arrive to the sea of sin, with the red of my flesh to offer him." A mirror-like rectangle appeared above the town square's fountain, spinning until it blurred into a black void. Then, Mr. Hister emerged from the darkness. Mr. Hister addressed the crowd, calling out, "My children, it is time to tell Mr. Hister what lesson you learned today." He selected a young
Because
girl
they
from
can
the
make
crowd
it seem
and
like
asked
they
her to
never
recite the
existed
lesson
in the
she
first
learned.
place.
She answered, repeating a lesson from Mr. Squibbles concerning the importance of tying one's shoes. Mr. Hister replied, "Your prize is to pass through the mirror and into the dreamlands." He lifted the girl into the air and tossed her into the mirror behind him. She screamed and disappeared. He proceeded to call up child after child, asking them to repeat the lesson that they learned. When they answered, they were tossed into the mirror. If the child couldn't remember their lesson, however, well, the less that is said about that, the better. Before long, the fountain was filled with deep red water, which the other Ticky Taffy Town entities greedily slurped up. Eventually, Mr. Hister turned to Dave, asking him what lesson he learned. Dave struggled to answer, guessing a phrase that Mr. Squibbles said, "Don't make Mrs. Bobble upset, lest you fail his hideous test." This was the wrong answer. Mr. Hister lifted Dave into the sky, where he was suspended upside down alongside other humanoid figures, one of whom he recognized as his long-lost younger brother, Jeremy. At this point,
boy.
Dave stopped responding to Dr. Monroe and his research team. The camera feed remained active for 3 days, suspended upside down next to Dave's body. On screen, a continuous stream of red liquid, presumed to be blood, could be seen flowing over the lens. The feed was cut short, and Dave was presumed lost. As harrowing as it was, this initial test provided the SCP Foundation with some vital information on the inner workings of SCP-5853-A. They were able to determine that, depending on the answer a stolen victim gives, they will be able to affect their own fate. If the victim answers Mr. Hister's question, "What did you learn today?" with the intended lesson imparted in the episode, they will be passed through the mirror. What awaits them beyond it, no one but Mr. Hister knows, but it is unlikely to be anything good. If the victim answers with a lesson they learned while inside of the extra-dimensional space, they will be left to hang upside down with Dave and the rest of those suspended in the air. If they don't remember, or lie about forgetting their lesson, they will be consumed by the entities. But there is one way out. If the victim answers by repeating or summarizing Mr. Hister's darker lesson from the episode, the victim will be released from the extra-dimensional space and transported back to the place they vanished from.
Oh,
For
that's
example,
good.
UIU Agent Mathis's son, Thomas, reappeared in the kitchen pantry of his home on January 8, 2000, after he did just that. Following the D-Class exploration of Ticky Taffy Town, Dr. Monroe reached out to Jennifer Lamb, requesting that she reconsider her decision to decline MTF operations in the area. She refused to change her mind, telling him to scan media spaces, recall the candy, and call it a day. With the Ethics Committee refusing to approve MTF action, Dr. Monroe instead reached out to his friend, Terrence Bazarian, who occupied an MTF Alpha position. He managed, via appealing to Terrence's role as a parent, to convince him to agree to an off-books, 3-man mission into the spatial anomaly of SCP-5853-A. The small, unofficial mobile task force began its
we all
operation
die
on January
eventually.
20th, 2000. Frank Monroe
It's just-
served as commanding officer. Terrence Bazarian
You know.
acted as team lead, Alpha, Robert Falk as right flank, Charlie, and Mohammed Al-Abi as left flank, Delta. Each member of the
Unfortunately,
team
they
was
couldn't get
instructed
the
to
ethics
consume a piece of
committee
cherry-flavored Ticky
to
Taffy and recite the phrase, "You may not believe in the slaughter, but the slaughter believes in you." Soon after, all 3 men were transported into the world of SCP-5853-A. They climbed out of the toy chest to find the cartoonish kitchen, the busily decorated living room, and the door to the outside area. The MTF team got to
Yeah.
work investigating the area immediately, making note of the fact
Hopefully.
that all of the items in the house were fake, simply props for a children's show. The door to the set began to open, and the 3 MTF members hid out of sight. Monroe warned them to not, under any circumstances, engage with the entities in any way. The cast, with the exception of Mr. Hister, entered the room and began checking the area for signs of new children transported to the world. Alpha was discovered first and opened fire on Mr. Squibbles, who stumbled backward, leaking brown fluid until it collapsed. The remaining entities began to scream as the area dimmed to black. Suddenly, everything was dark and silent. The MTF feed switched to night
This
vision
doesn't
as
seem
Delta,
good.
Charlie, and Alpha began to explore the area.
I think we're
Monroe
about to
ordered
see
them
the
to get to the town
consequences of
center
what
as
lighting
fast
this
as
place
possible
up does.
and tell Mr. Hister the key phrase so that they could be transported back to the SCP Foundation site. As he delivered the instructions, his audio feed began to degrade until the MTF officers could no longer hear him. Left alone in Ticky Taffy Town, they had to proceed on their own. As the officers resumed motion, Franzipans flew at Charlie's head at top speed, its hammer beak colliding with the man's head and sending him careening into a nearby wall.
Oh boy.
The impact was fatal, and Agent Charlie collapsed to the ground, dead. Agents Alpha and Delta continued firing on Franzipans, and Alpha ordered Delta to head toward the door and make his way out. When he reached the door, however, Mr. Squibbles was waiting on the other side. It grabbed Agent Delta as an instance of Kizzywink used its claws to kill him. In a heroic dying act, Agent Delta pulled the pin from one of his incendiary grenades and charged at Mr. Squiggles, blowing them both up. Agent Alpha was the only one left standing, alone with Mrs. Bobble the clown. She charged at Alpha as he fired a grenade round that subdued her. Taking his moment, Alpha escaped the building, navigating his way through the pitch-black landscape.
Oh man.
Alpha used his night vision view to navigate a narrow path toward a single light in the distance. He walked for approximately 182 minutes, at which point he remarked on the sensation of the path deepening, lengthening, and pulling him down. He began to approach the town square before everything faded to static. When Alpha's video feed returned, he was standing in front of a white wooden door. He reached out to open it and spotted a woman that appeared to be Jessie Bazarian, his wife, sitting in a rocking
boy.
chair and humming a lullaby to the infant in her arms. He attempted to speak to her, but she addressed him in the manner of Mr. Hister, saying, "See the mirror, through the mirror. The mirror is the only salvation. Salvation achieved by sacrifice to he who is divine among the dreamlands. Release yourself through the mirror, ascend through the mirror, transcend through the mirror." Alpha screamed, collapsing to the ground. When he regained consciousness, he was face to face with Mr. Hister himself. The entity smugly asked, "Terrence, what did you learn today?" Rather than reciting the key phrase and attempting to return home, Alpha pulled the pin from his remaining grenade and let it fall to the ground. The video feed cut out, and the entire mobile task force that entered Ticky Taffy Town that day was presumed dead.
And
2
that's
days
why
later,
we don't
Dr.
do that.
Frank Monroe sent out the following email. "To whom it may concern and C. Miles, I regret to inform you that I am no longer able to fulfill my duties as researcher. I have come to the realization that Lamb was right, although I don't agree with her. I can't keep trying to save the world from the things we study. It's not about how far I can probe. It's for our own protection. I need to know when to call it quits. I could spend X number of dollars and X number of lives sacrificing to whatever to wherever I think, or wherever I think the mirror may bring us, who Mr. Hister might be, or the implications of a clown entity called Bobble. I could try to chase these down to their penultimate conclusion, sacrificing MTF, D-Class, and innocence alike. Lamb, she was right. God, I'm sorry, Terrence. All SCP-5853 needs is to be hidden, in the dark. I'm sorry, I'm just not made for this. Not anymore. I can no longer do this. Let me forget. Let me go back. Consider this my resignation. Respectfully, Dr. Frank Monroe." After a review by the O5 Council, Dr. Monroe's resignation request was denied.
Oh,
All
that's just
SCP-5853
cruel.
products have been publicly recalled. Any instances of SCP-5853 are to be kept in a standard containment unit in Secure Facility 64, Wing F. If any instances of SCP-5853 are discovered being sold, the sale must be intercepted immediately. Every episode of SCP-5853-A has been removed from the air, and television broadcasts and online video sites must be scanned regularly in order to prevent further spread of the materials. No Foundation personnel, including D-Class, that have or are considered having children may be assigned to SCP-5853. The SCP Foundation has attempted to uncover the identities of production staff and actors from the show, but so far, the investigation has turned up nothing but dead leads. A close analysis of the show's credits showed that, rather than a list of staff that worked on the episode, they consist of a constantly growing list of names. These names include those of children reported missing, as well as individuals yet to be identified. On January 23, 2000, the names Robert Falk, Mohammed Al-Abi, Terrence Bazarian, and Frank Monroe were added. Frank Monroe was pronounced missing in action, and to this day has never been found. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today.
It just
go
seems
and watch
like a
another entry from the
black
files of Dr. Bob,
hole.
like SCP-1357, the Children's Park.
Okay. You require the Emperor's gifts to purge the Mirror Heresy? Well, unfortunately, the Mirror Heresy is going to purge you. What should we watch next? What do I think? Oh gosh, there's so many options. Ooh, Vibing Leaf. It's 9:40 already. Ah, shoot, it is. Well, I don't really have to work tomorrow is the thing. So I can keep going if I wanted to. Go to bed? Probably a good idea, yeah. Nah, I think it's good for us to cut it here. Thank you everybody for joining me on the stream for tonight. It was interesting. We saw a lot of cool videos. Yes, leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video. Comment down in the comments. Check out my Twitter and suggest some scary videos for next time. And it was fun hanging out with everybody who came to the stream, but I gotta go play possum now. Till next time, we'll be seeing you.